The Kenmore City Council is now in session. First on the agenda is agenda approval. Unless there's any objection, the agenda will stand approved. Councilmember Marshall.
Will we take roll first?
It is a special meeting, so roll call is not required.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. Any objections? Seeing no objection, the agenda is approved. Next, we have a proclamation for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Whereas in Washington State, 45% of women and 22% of men report having experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, as evidence indicates that transgender and gender non-binary people are at even higher risk. And whereas 29% of the survivors who were supported by community sexual assault organizations statewide identified as Black, Indigenous, and people of color in 2019. Of those identifying ethnicity, 21% identified as Latinx, Hispanic, and whereas rape is among the most underreported crimes for many reasons, including victims' fear of being disbelieved or further traumatized within the legal system. Additional barriers such as language, immigration status, gender bias, and systemic racism further oppress and silence victims. And whereas individual and community impacts of sexual violence are rooted in and compounded by racism, sexism, heterosexism, and other forms of oppression. Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people living in poverty, LGBTQ+ people, elders, people with disabilities, and other people targeted by oppression are disproportionately affected by sexual violence in significant and complex ways. And whereas sexual violence exists on a continuum of behavior and includes racist, sexist, transphobic, homophobic, ableist, and other hate speech. This ranges from rape jokes to verbal harassment to threats of rape and assault. Harassing comments and behaviors that take place online can and do traumatize victims, and their impacts should not be minimized. And whereas 41% of Americans have been personally subjected to harassing behavior online, and people from historically oppressed groups are more likely to experience online harassment, mirroring inequities we see elsewhere in society. And whereas negative impacts of sexual violence, trauma on adults, youth, and children include fear, concern for safety, missed work or school, injury, and physical and mental health conditions, including symptoms of post-traumatic distress disorder. And whereas working together as a community, we can alleviate the trauma of sexual violence by ensuring supportive resources are available to all survivors, while standing up to and actively disrupting harmful attitudes and behaviors that contribute to sexual violence. Now, therefore, our Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, join advocates and communities throughout King County in taking action to prevent sexual violence by standing with survivors and proclaiming April 2023 Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Together, we commit to a safer future for all children, young people, adults, and families in our community. And we have online Laurel Redden, the Director of Communications and Policy at the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center, joining us virtually to receive the proclamation. Laurel, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, and thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor Herbig, Deputy Mayor O'Kane, and all the members of the council for being part of the solution to sexual violence. I'm Laurel Redden. I am the Director of Communications and Policy at the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. Wish I could be there with you in person, and thank you for doing what you're doing. I want to say a quick word. Young people are the age group that are most at risk of sexual assault. And frequently that happens in the home. We know there's an intense focus around the county, around the state, on the very vexing problem of homelessness, and that is rightly so. Just want to point out that preventing homelessness is possible when we understand more of the factors that contribute to it. So, for example, sexual assault can be a cause of homelessness due to abuse in the home. And we often see that among young people experiencing homelessness, especially young people who are LGBTQ. Stopping abuse and managing trauma effects before they escalate to serious mental health impacts requires us all to take it seriously when someone experiences abuse and not minimize that trauma. So I appreciate your words tonight. This all requires us to know how to support someone who discloses abuse and get them the help that they need. And certainly our resource center stands ready to do that. So certainly we appreciate your willingness to talk about this issue. The bottom line is we cannot change what we can't talk about. And what you're doing here is really important. By talking about sexual violence, you're sending an important message to survivors that you're not alone and that your story matters. And you also send a terrific message to the community that they need to know, which is that they can prevent sexual violence, but it takes everyone's involvement. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Laurel, thank you so much for yours and the work of the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. Dreaming of a day when we no longer have to proclaim Sexual Violence Awareness Month because it's no longer an issue that we have to face. For now, drawing awareness to it and the work that you're doing and that we can do as a member of this community to end sexual violence is what we can do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from Camp United We Stand, presented by board member Bill Leone and campers Orlando Latimer, Kelly Taylor, and Christopher Carter.
Well, thank you for inviting us here tonight. I really appreciate what City of Kenmore has done for the camp, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to explain a little bit of who we are and what we do and how we operate to give you a better picture of this camp and how it's working in your community. I also am a homeowner in Kenmore. I live in Lake Forest Park. My daughter lives in Kenmore, just up the hill from here. So this is part of my community too. With me today are Orlando Latimer and Kelly Taylor and Christopher Carter, who are all residents in our camp and some of the movers and shakers who make things work there. We are a 501c3 nonprofit and have been around since 2014. It was a spinoff from one of the larger camps, and people in the camp at that time said they wanted to live in a smaller community, and so formed with the help of several churches, especially Haller Lake United Methodist Church and St. Dunstan's Episcopal Church. And this is our first time residing in Kenmore. We reached out to North Lake Lutheran, which had hosted Camp Unity, which was similarly an itinerant camp. They have since found permanent housing for their residents and gave us a lot of their stuff, which we appreciate. So now we are the only itinerant camp, legally sanctioned camp in King County. So we're kind of a unique animal in that regard. And so we appreciate the opportunity to be in Kenmore and really appreciate the help that we've gotten from North Lake and from the Kenmore city staff. So I would like to say that your process of, requiring a permit and filling out a lot of paperwork online and meeting with staff, though it was long, it was well done. The staff were friendly and helpful and knowledgeable, and we're not putting in barriers, but helping us figure out how to meet the guidelines that you've set. And we think they are quite reasonable guidelines. The one exception I'll make is that I think 125 days is a bit short. One of the serious problems that we face is moving from time to time. It's one of our biggest expenses, and it causes a lot of stress and anxiety and whenever we move. But that kind of the way we've set up, but the less frequently we move, the better. So I would encourage you to take a look at that 125-day limit and maybe move that to 6 months. But other than that, I think your process is a good one. Let me just show you, here's the layout before we moved in of how we set up the camp. It's now changed a little bit because those empty parking spaces now are filled with tents. The church allowed us a little more space there because of the need is greater. We currently, I think, have about 32 campers.
Yeah, a little under 30. So about 29.
28, 29.
Yes.
It does vary day to day.
Yes.
30? Okay. Okay. So I wanted to show you some pictures. This is the entrance to the camp. It's on the north side of the church, if you know that property at all. And it's a very protected site from the weather and from visibility. There are only a few houses that look down on the camp. So not very many residents are visually affected by the camp. We have a security tent, which is what everybody comes to when they come to the camp, and campers sign in daily and visitors sign in here too. This is staffed 24/7. And Orlando, maybe you can say a little bit more about how the camp is running around that regard.
Hello, my name's Orlando. So I'm an EC at the camp. So our ECs are executive committee. So we're here to kind of run the day-to-day events of the camp. If any problems happen or anything, we're here to they come and address us. We also have a security shifts that we run 56 shifts. I have a 7-day period, eight shifts a day. And we require every camper to participate in the shift. We want 24-hour security of our camp and also the hosts. So it's always secure. We also, when we bring people in, we have security checks. We also have, what is the word I'm looking for?
Background check.
Background checks, yes. So we call the police and they do a background check. Also a, other word I'm looking for.
The sex offender list?
Yes, also a sex offender. So it's very safe. We try to keep it as safe as we can. Of course, with homeless people, there's always some sort of problems. But I think that's pretty much for our job. Yeah.
And so there are a lot of rules that campers have to adhere to in the camp. We make that very clear at the beginning: no drugs, no alcohol, no firearms, no violence, no harassment. So if any of that stuff happens, then people complain to one of the ECs. There's an incident report. Usually the board's informed. The ECs, can take action and bar people from the camp from 1 day to 7 days to permanently if it's something serious. And that does happen. It's happened at this camp, but that's the way we make sure, because otherwise, our mission is to let people to find, temporary housing for people and then to help them find permanent housing. So we're just starting to do more on that score. So just to show you the kind of physical layout, you'll see in this slide that the tents are on platforms. Some of them have metal on the bottom and some have wood, but that keeps them off the ground, off the wet ground especially. And then the tents are on those platforms. And then you can see on the left that there's a metal structure there. We have these metal frames that Camp Unity actually built and gave to us. And then that allows us to put a bigger tarp over the tent. And it protects people from the weather and protects the tents from a little wear. The big box in the middle is a Wi-Fi, so the camp does have that. Just a picture of some of the camps. You'll see there's a wide space for emergency access. 20-foot is mandated by the emergency vehicles, so we maintain that at all times. We have we contract with Honey Bucket. We have a wheelchair accessible and a regular and a wash station, and it's serviced twice a week. And that seems to be minimally adequate for the camp now. It varies depending on population. This is our kitchen tent. We have meals delivered right now twice a week on Sundays and Tuesdays from churches that are supporting the camp. There's other food deliveries from food banks, and there's a refrigerator for personal use and then another for camp use. There's actually a process underway right now where Sawhorse Revolution, which is a nonprofit that teaches young people how to do construction skills and design, they're actually building a portable kitchen unit. So it'll be a wooden structure that we can fold up and move with us from camp to camp. That'll give us better kitchen space. And Kelly, you can tell us about how the kitchen is run and other things.
Sorry, the kitchen coordinator receives food donations that come in, keep the kitchen organized and clean, and make sure that we don't have outdated or bad food. Some of the other responsibilities in camp is donations coordinator. Each year he keeps our donation tent organized and clean. Our tent coordinator helps people set up their tents and platforms and keeps track of new tents. Our garbage coordinator takes garbage to the dumpster. Our supply clerk keeps inventory and lets the board know when we need supplies. Our camp clerk takes notes at the camp meetings and keeps records of the campers. When we get a new camper, we do an intake on them, check for warrants and sex offenders, and show them around the camp and explain the rules. And the board liaison attends the camp meetings and the board meetings. And that's,
And
thank you.
Kelly's our liaison to the board and a
Yes.
former EC. as well. Just show you a few more slides. This is a recent thing that Christopher, I think, would help put together. We now have a hot water sink. Runs on propane, so it's helps us wash the dishes and do personal cleanup. We have a community tent with a couple of TVs and games and books for people to relax in, and a heater that heat this tent. We have a donations tent that Kelly mentioned. So we have a lot of clothing and shoes and other things that people might need, blankets and socks and gloves. We have pets in the camp. We have what, 2 dogs, 3 cats, 4 cats?
3 cats.
Wow. All right. This gives you a view from the kind of center of the camp, and you can see a couple of houses in the hillside above, but these are among the few houses that have, visual sight of the camp. On the east side of the camp, we put up this screen, and then so the people down below really don't see the camp at all. And there's a walkway along that allows neighbors who live north of the camp to walk past the camp and access to community gardens that are on the south side of the church, or to walk through down to Kenmore Town Hall Center. So we've made it possible to keep, access to the local neighborhood. So, and this is what the camp looks like at night. And security tent is always there. Somebody's always watching out for what's going on. This is one of our most innovative new projects. And I'll let Christopher explain this new innovation, which is going to be much needed.
Good evening. Thank y'all for y'all's open arms and open ears and open hearts. It means a lot to us out here. I first experienced TC3 back in 2015. And I went down to LA in the East Coast. We got to live on a boat. And I come back here and I experienced this camp years later after I knew about it and was a part of it. And the walls that have been busted through to help create this, and to see the progress that the people within the camps have made to make themselves live better, have a better life, to remove some of the stress. I found Orlando and Kelly in this camp, and them too, they have that same mentality to help ease the stress off the people in the camp. There's well over 1,000 reasons why we're here. And to build this shower gives us a chance to come out and transition from a camp we used to be to something better. There's 15 campers in the camp who hold down full-time jobs. They don't have that shower. They, with the EPA and the strain on the laws that we all face, we've adapted the Rhino cans, which are designed for for the RV systems. And it's a portable Rhino can and that's how we deal with our gray water, with our sink systems. Bill, he went and got these, he went and ordered them. They came in and we're using them. We have a 36-gallon and we haul it down to the clean out for the church. They have a clean out to their sewage system, and that's how we dump our gray water. We'll end up doing the same with our showers, using the same can. We're looking at probably having 2 dumps a day. We've been in contact with North Shore. As long as we're not putting a couple 100 gallons at one time, they're okay with our process. Spoke with Lucas, and he's taking it up to the next level to make sure that we can continue dumping into the gray water system as we are. The shower you see has a ramp. We're doing our best to be as handicap accessible as we can be. You notice back in a few shots, there was looked like a handrail system that was going into a tent that was for a stroke victim. She's no longer in the camp. She's gone out to a house. But individuals like that come in. Once again, there's 1,000 reasons why you'll find people in these encampments. And to have this encampment in y'all's neighborhoods, I have enjoyed this day. It's so pleasant. The trees, as Bill said, the spot up on the hill, the protection, it's far above our expectations. The people, the community, been real blessed and get to sit out on these benches and visit with the community. That means a lot. And I know there's some community members that within themselves, they expect to see this. I think I've shared a lot of time or taken a lot of time. I'm going to pass it back to Bill.
Well, one thing I'll just point out is Christopher is designing and building this portable shower so that we can move it from camp to camp. It'll fold up and be on wheels, and we can wheel it into our van. We rent a big panel truck whenever we move. So it'll be something we can take from camp to camp. I'm not sure we'll have it ready for this visit, but maybe it'll pioneer itself.
We're
on
working
this
hard
side.
for it.
It takes a lot, and it costs about over $1,500 in materials, and all the labor is free. Some of the materials donated too. So that's what we're is our most immediate need, I'd say. Other things are quite costly. It costs about $3,000 to $3,500 per month to manage to run things in this camp, and all of that comes from donations. We don't get any government support. We don't have any grants. It's just donations from people who see the need and care about us. And, you know, when people see our setup and compare it to the, you know, the camps that people set up on the roadside, there is no comparison. So I wanted to show you a few pictures and invite you to come to the camp, and we'll show you around, and you can see it in person. But also we wanted to thank you, Kenmore, for from us, from the board, from the church, and the many supporters in the community. The Senior Center gave welcome gift baskets. The Sherwin-Williams donated supplies to us. Other people dropped off food and clothing. So our stay in Kenmore has been very great. And happy to entertain any questions you might have about our camp or processes or anything.
Do we have any camp questions? No question
No, but if there's
or
an ask,
comments?
is there an ask here? Because I'd like to make a motion.
We would request a donation from the city of Kenmore in the tune of about $1,500 to help with that shower you saw, if that's.
I would move that we donate up to $2,000 as needed to assist with the building of the shower.
I'll second.
Seconded.
There's a motion and a second. Shall we take the vote?
Clerk?
On the motion.
Or do
the-
we want to have
Oh,
discussion?
sorry.
I don't know that there is discussion, but looks like Councilmember Shrubnik has.
Yeah, this is great. I just want to make sure we know we have a budget line that we can take it out of.
City manager
Yeah.
or assistant city manager.
Yeah, there isn't a budget line for this, so I would welcome suggestions from the council
Well,
where we
it's
think
like the
this
human
funding.
service budget.
Yeah,
I
those
mean,
funds
it's
have all been allocated in the human services funding. So we can certainly go back and take a look.
Strategic ops.
Strategic opportunities.
Yeah.
We could do strategic opportunities fund, yep.
Any further discussion or questions that we might have? Councilmember Marshall.
This doesn't really go to the motion, just a question. What kind of fire prevention measures do you have, and do you coordinate with the North Shore Fire Department at all? Thanks.
Yes, very, very good question. Yeah, I mentioned that we maintain a 20-foot buffer so that the emergency vehicles can come all the way through the camp if they needed to put out a fire or if needed to bring somebody to the hospital. We have fire extinguishers placed strategically throughout the community. We have those checked every 6 months, or I think every 6 months or at least once a year, whatever is required to make sure they're in working order and tagged appropriately. We educate campers on safe use of propane, which is used for heating and cooking. We keep all the propane stored away from any fires. We keep smoking restricted to one tent that's away from all of that. So that's how we deal with it. Anything else?
Well, we have a fire extinguishers at every camp, every tent, anything that you see there's a fire extinguisher there. And it's every 3 months, because every time we move, we have the fire department comes out and they check and we get everything done.
They also check about the layout of the camp to make sure that there are not too many tents clustered together and that they have access to, if they need to get in between tents. Here, it's pretty easy because they're separated on two sides of the driveway. But in other places where we go, they're in rows and clusters, but we make sure to leave rows, spaces between the tents so people can walk and access those tents. And that, you know, if a fire started, it wouldn't engulf the whole camp. But yeah, we're very conscious about that.
If this is some in regards to the shower, the interior is made out of fiberglass, resin, and gel coating. And our water heater will incorporate an electric water heater into our shower. We're hoping to move the propane water heater as it is now. We keep our propane tanks 10 feet apart as regulations require.
Yeah, and we educate campers on how to keep, airflow in the tents so that, the off-gassing from any of the heaters is not a problem. And we have only small little buddy heaters that which is all is needed for the small tent space, and no open flames are allowed.
Thank you. Any further discussion related to the motion? And Councilmember Baker, the motion is for a city of, would you like to state the motion, or
Yeah, I move to authorize.
Councilmember
Deputy
Baker.
Clerk?
I actually already have it. If
Good.
the motion to have Kenmore donate up to $2,000 as needed to build the portable shower.
Yep. That's it.
Okay, great. On the motion to have Kenmore donate up to $2,000 as needed to build the portable shower, seconded by Councilmember File, Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Beyond our expectations.
I'm thankful, and I think the rest of this council is thankful that we have space for Camp United We Stand. I want to thank each of you for being here today. Ando, Kelly, and Christopher, it's so important that you are here to speak on behalf of your experience at the camp, demonstrate the leadership you're providing there, your heart and innovation, safety, security, a stable place is necessary to help people get on their feet and find long-term housing. And I'm so absolutely thankful for what you're doing and that we can help you out today. Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I really thank you guys for coming tonight. I know it's rather daunting to sit here in front of us, and you guys really came through, and we truly appreciate your participation in this and helping Camp Unity be a better place for everybody. So thank you all very much.
Deputy Clerk.
Councilmember File has her hand raised.
Oh, Councilmember File.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank the members of Camp Unity and your team for being good neighbors to our community. Everybody deserves an opportunity to have a safe, welcoming environment, and Kenmore prides ourselves on being a safe, welcoming, affirming community. I have visited the site, and I have heard while you're waiting for showers, there is also an additional ask I have not heard yet mentioned tonight. And what was proposed to me was a request for athletic memberships, like a monthly membership that would give access in the meantime to showers. That would give people the right or the opportunity to be able to access safe hygiene and be presentable for work. Is that still a need?
Yes, it is.
Are you making that ask as well? Or would you like to make a request to a nonprofit, for example?
No, we would like to make that request to you if it's available. That would be a great interim solution for most campers.
To my fellow colleagues, I would like to propose discussion around this topic and possibly an amendment to the motion we met.
Would Councilmember Marshall?
I think it sounds like a good idea. However, I'd like to have more exploration by staff in exactly how it can be served, because one challenge we have in Kenmore is going to be to create actually facilities like youth activity centers in Kenmore. And right now, other than the schools, I can't think of, and everybody can remind me, I can't think of anything that we've got at present. So I'd like to definitely have staff look into it.
Any other discussion? I also think it would be good to have staff look into this and bring it back to us. Oh, Councilmember Shrubnik.
So it sounds like about half of the campers do have jobs, and I'm curious how are they, getting cleaned up to go to work? I mean, how is that happening?
There's several campers who do have the athletic gyms, and then you got the
Okay.
community centers. And if you've seen that sink that was built at Vanity,
Yeah.
it's a temporary bird bath house until the shower's in.
Wow.
And we
okay.
have the aluminum trays that our food, St. Dunstan's sends our food in. We wash them, and that's where we stand, and we catch our gray water and we pour it back into the system, and it goes down to the
So
dump.
it's catch as catch can,
Yes.
basically, at this point. Okay.
We do what we
All
can.
right. Yeah. Well, yeah, if you can help generate kind of what the cost would be in the interim, that would be, when staff discuss it.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. I really appreciate the council's willingness to engage this topic a little further. And I understand there are both gyms within our limits of the city's borders as well as outside. Ideally, it's best to have this kind of service available within a bus ride. And so I would like our staff to look at close proximity to the 522 corridor and access within a single bus route, if we could, please. Thank you.
And we'd be happy to work with staff on that too, to figure out, where campers are going and what, because very few have cars. So you're thinking about the buses is the right thing to think about. Also, I should mention that we have laundry service. St. Luke's has organized that. It's a group of volunteers who come and pick up campers' laundry and bring it back clean, neat, and folded.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here and for the discussion. And we're really thankful that the city of Kenmore can support Camp United to Stand. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Welcome. Thank y'all.
Thank you all.
And do keep them smiles shining. We all need them.
Now we have a presentation on the RePlus pledge from Patty Liu, King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks Solid Waste Division Program Manager. Hi, Patty.
Hello. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to share my screen here. Hopefully you guys all can see that. First, I want to say I'm really honored to be here. I'm actually a Kenmore native. Actually went to Girl Scouts at the North Lake Lutheran Church where Camp United We Stand is located. And just seeing your actions tonight as a city council makes me really proud to be from Kenmore, so thank you. Again, my name is Patty Liu. I am the RePlus Program Manager for King County Solid Waste Division. RePlus is our new county program that is focused on improving waste diversion and recycling. If you look at the GIF that is no longer moving on my PowerPoint screen, it kind of helps explain the name. You can recycle that piece of paper, reuse a water bottle, repair a bike, restore a piece of furniture, reduce your consumption and rethink your purchasing habits in the first place. That's kind of our way of capturing all those rewards through our logo. So before you throw that thing away, see if you can replus it instead. This is our mission and vision for the program. RePlus is our approach to reach the county's zero waste of resources goal. About 70% of what gets thrown away every year is useful. It's cardboard, metal, food, etc. These can all be put to better, more useful purposes than just going to a landfill. The goal of RePlus is to minimize our environmental impacts by moving towards zero waste while creating opportunities for everyone in King County to thrive. So what does zero waste of resources look like? Well, it looks a little something like what you see on the screen. It's much less material going to landfill, almost 500,000 tons. It's fewer trees being cut down each year to make paper. A portion of the food that is thrown away every year is still edible, and it's actually enough to feed 92,000 people, which is about, I believe, 500 elementary schools worth of food. More jobs. RePlus is a job growth engine. We need more people to collect materials, process those materials, build capital infrastructure, etc. We could save disposal costs in the future. So a decision hasn't been made yet about what to do after our landfill, Cedar Hills Regional Landfill, closes. But if it's waste export, then we save money on each ton we don't have to export, which is what this graphic shows. And finally, if we can harvest all the plastic that gets thrown away, this can save 150,000 barrels of oil from being burned. RePlus is also a call to action that incorporates goals highlighted in several county and city documents. In these documents, you'll see the goals of zero food waste to landfill by 2030, zero waste of resources by 2030 through reuse, reduction, and prevention efforts. This is included in County Code, the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, and the King County Comprehensive Solid Waste Management Plan, which was adopted by cities last in 2019. And in the King County Equity and Social Justice Strategic Plan, as we develop and implement RePlus, we are addressing disproportionate burdens on our communities and creating equitable opportunities for people to benefit and participate in the RePlus program. So I've mentioned 2030 a few times, which is only 7 years away. So with RePlus, we have to start fulfilling these obligations now. So in preparation for RePlus, we enlisted a research firm to do a survey of residents to gauge how much they support the concept of RePlus. So this slide shows just that hearing a brief introductory statement about RePlus has strong support. You'll see that 63% of respondents support RePlus, 8% oppose, and the rest needed just a little bit more information before making a judgment. And then this slide shows responses to more general descriptions around waste prevention and reduction, which are actions that we are undertaking with RePlus. For example, the first one shows that 91% want harmonized recycling across our service area because currently what you can recycle is different depending on where you live, work, and play. The second question also shows 91% for enacting legislation and technology to recycle more and reduce less waste. And then across these 8 questions, the lowest score was 67%, which is very, very good. And then this slide shows the jump in support for RePlus after providing a few more details about specific actions in RePlus. The takeaway here is that with just a few sentences, people seem to understand the program at a high level, and support actually jumped 26 points to 88%. So before we jump into the program specifics, I did want to give a little bit more context to this work. So King County's 50-year history of waste management innovation includes establishing one of the nation's first curbside recycling programs, increasing diversion of construction and demolition materials and the collection of yard waste. In 2018, we recycled 1 million tons versus throwing away 800,000 tons, which has led to one of the highest recycling rates in the US at 54%. This is illustrative of the incredible work that the county and cities have done in the past to address a very challenging problem. However, there are a few areas where we, the county, are lagging. Many cities collect garbage every week, but collect organics and recycling every other week. So we're looking at flipping this around. Extended producer response responsibility has been implemented in many European countries and states in the US and puts more responsibility on producers to increase the recycling of their products. Washington is actually the only state on the West Coast that hasn't passed an extended producer responsibility law. And around 15% of what gets thrown away, again, is food. This is over 100,000 tons of food per year, which is way too much. And although I just mentioned that our 54% recycling rate is good in comparison to other places in the US, if you look at this graph, we've actually stagnated in our recycling performance. Our rate has been relatively flat over the past 7 years. And if you go back 23 years, our average annual increase in the recycling rate is only 0.6%. So a reminder that the last waste characterization study shows that 70% of what is still being thrown away could have been recycled, repaired, or reused. So there's much more work that we can do to reduce waste. And RePlus, we hope, provides these actions to get us out of the plateau. So this is an overview of the specific actions we are taking. As you can see, the major categories that we're targeting are plastic and paper and organics. Those are the two largest material categories that are going into our landfill. And these are materials that are recyclable. There's no reason they should be going to a landfill. So the impacts from RePlus, as you can see, are pretty large on diversion and greenhouse gas reductions. Potentially 400,000 tons of waste diverted to better use is a big number. Reducing greenhouse gases or metric tons of carbon dioxide by 300,000 is equivalent to reducing emissions from a car driving 744 million miles. And just for context, that almost gets us from Earth to Saturn. So that's quite a lot of impact we can make through RePlus. There are things to consider, though. It takes money to implement these actions, capital investments, staff to provide assistance to cities and businesses, et cetera. So rates are likely to increase. One thing to note is that residents see the largest drop in their garbage bill when they move to smaller bin sizes. So as people adjust their behavior, they may be able to offset increases in rates by moving to a smaller garbage can. This also requires behavior change. Businesses and people need to start sorting out their waste more. A good example is, again, with food waste, as discussed earlier, where businesses will now have to put organics bins in their spaces to collect the food waste, which means their customers now need to know what goes in what bin. So as actions are implemented, more green jobs will be needed to process the increase in recycling. And we'll need people to collect and process materials. So we will see an increase in jobs in the region. So what can cities like yours do to help further this effort? Well, cities are the biggest and one of the most important partners we have in this effort. So we're asking cities to sign the RePlus Pledge, which is a high-level agreement to the principles that will move us closer to a zero-waste future. Incorporate elements of the RePlus plan into your policy updates by signing the RePlus Pledge that qualifies you to apply for a city RePlus grant. We ask that cities can also support legislation that is in line with RePlus and educate your residents and businesses about how they can reduce their waste. So yes, as you can see on the right side of your screen, those are the cities that have so far signed the RePlus Pledge. These are the cities that we have presented to, and I'm happy to move Kenmore from the scheduled to completed column. And then we have a few cities that we haven't presented to yet. We haven't had anything on the calendar set, but if you have any colleagues that serve these cities, please let them know that we are interested in talking to them and want to invite them to join RePlus. So again, you'll see so far the cities of Shoreline, Woodinville, Clyde Hill, Carnation, Newcastle, Kirkland, and Covington have signed on to support RePlus, which brings us over halfway to our May goal of 12 RePlus city partners with a signed pledge. And that does it for me. Thank you for your time. If you have questions on the RePlus program, I'm happy to answer. And I believe my colleague, Amy Okerlander, is also on the call, so she can answer any questions you might have about city involvement and the RePlus Pledge.
Councilmember Baker, I understand you have.
Yes. Mayor Okerlander, I don't know if you have more background. I was on SWAC in 2005. We had about 52% diversion to recycling back then. It looks like we really haven't improved on that at all. Why the slow adoption? I mean, I know you've had many programs over the years, but nothing seems to get that number up. Any ideas?
Great question, Councilmember Baker. I think, I think one of the key things, if you look at our public opinion research polling, that folks want harmonized standards. I think that's one of the biggest factors to not being able to get those rates up. As we hear on a regular basis from city to city, people are frustrated by the fact they can be in one jurisdiction and go to another and not have the same recycling standards. There's also still some real hesitancy and doubt about whether or not what gets put in the recycling bins is being recycled. So after China soared, the resolution of China soared, there's still broad range assumptions that our trash and our recycling gets shipped overseas and never recycled, which is not accurate for Washington State. So those are just two big issues going out there. I think another issue is that every single city in King County has a different contract with their hauler, and the UTC cities as well, and unincorporated King County. So those standards not being harmonized provides a lot of confusion and frustration for the customer. So you end up with wish cycling. You end up with folks that get frustrated and just throw everything in the garbage because they don't have confidence in the system. So part of moving forward with this RePlus program is to educate our consumers throughout the county and really collaborate with our cities to move forward to take action that does drive those rates higher.
So after a number of years of serving on the SWAC, I am still confused what goes where. The other thing is bags. We can't dump supposedly plastic bags in the garbage or in the recycling. We can take them back to the grocery store, but what else can we do with them? Because a lot of people will not store bags in their house and take them back to the grocery store or whoever happens to be taking them back this week. Any ideas what we can do?
Well, first and foremost, take advantage of the reusable bags that stores do sell. We've gone from, with the plastic bag being in Washington State, we've gone from single-use, very thin bags to grocery stores sell for $8 a bag, a much thicker so-called reusable plastic bag. But that really doesn't do anything to solve the problem in the big scheme of things. So I think most importantly is really encouraging folks to use paper bags and use those reusable bags on a regular basis and decline using plastic bags. On a personal level, if I forget my reusable bag at Safeway when I go to the grocery store, I pile everything in the cart and take it out to my car and put it in the back. Much like Costco, instead of using and taking those plastic bags, I do what I can to defer use. A lot of it definitely boils down to community outreach and education and habit building, habit forming. Once you get into the habit, it's easy. I think for many folks, if you see a recycling bin, you're going to pop your aluminum can or your plastic bottle in it if it's available, and it's easy. A huge portion of the effort that we will be doing is community outreach and really trying to streamline, working with cities to streamline the services across the county to encourage more adoption and better adherence to the standards.
What are we doing about multifamily? Because that's another big area to help with reaching that target of 70%.
Absolutely. Great question. And that is something we are working on and in analyzing and doing community outreach on. I can say that the city of Issaquah is one of the cities in this county that's leading the charge with making sure that multifamily has access to not just recycling, but composting as well. And so that's a good connection with Mayor Polly over there to learn more about what they're doing. And they've got a very comprehensive contract with their hauler, including hiring a zero waste manager to educate the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. You know, the RePlus program is really important to support. Serving on the Hazardous Waste Committee, every step we can take as municipalities helps further meeting our goals of reducing harmful things from entering into waste. Yet when we can take greater measures such as organic waste disposal, food waste, composting, it helps reduce what impacts the chain into the landfill. So I'd like to recommend that we take the pledge and sign on to the RePlus pledge. Additionally, one of the things we can consider is similarly to what the city of Seattle has done is require composting. That is an alternative, and there is a way to look at that as an ordinance. That's just a different step we can take. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. Nancy Caulkins from Republic Services also had her hand raised.
Hi, I am the recycling coordinator for Public Services, and I will actually be talking about a lot of these topics in just a moment. But I am curious, I just have a question for Councilmember Baker. Where did you learn or hear that plastic bags can't go in the garbage?
Actually, I believe from your haulers, because you have a contract with us.
Oh, yes. I mean, we do through the UTC, but plastic bags absolutely can and should go in the garbage if you don't have a alternative service subscription like Ridwell, or if you just don't have the time or are not able to get to a store site where you can drop off the plastic bags to be recycled into composite decking, usually by Trex. So I just wanted to get some more information from you about that. Thank you.
Yeah, Wendy, that's a new one. I haven't heard that before, either from you or Jeff or other ones down there at Republic. So that's good to know.
Thank you, Natalie. Councilmember Shrevenick.
Oh, I just had a quick question for Amy, actually, or maybe Amy and Patty. It sounds like you're, pardon me, hearing about some really good practices in cities, you know, around the county. Issaquah, you named as an example. And I'm just wondering whether, you know, maybe quarterly or, you know, when you hear about things like that, you could pass them along to the rest of the cities in the county, just so that, you know, sounds like a great idea. Let's adopt it, you know, and kind of, you know, be pushing out the best practices.
That's an excellent point, council member, and that is something that we are actually currently working on. We do plan to put a quarterly update on RePlus activities out to our cities, as well as we move along here, developing a staff and elected official committee, very much like K4C, to bring folks together and discuss what's going on and share out all of that fantastic work that's being done by the cities and the county, and intensify that collaboration and information sharing.
Any further? Oh, Councilmember Kugler. Or, oh, okay.
I don't have a question. I was just going to move that we pass the resolution number 23-396 to support the RePlus pledge.
Do we have a second?
Second, Councilmember File.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Clerk?
On the motion to pass resolution number 23-396 in support of the RE+ pledge, seconded by Councilmember File. Councilmember Kugler?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane?
Yes.
Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
And Councilmember Baker, you had a comment.
Mayor Okerlander, it's nice to see you in this position. You have a strong background in what our cities need. And I'm really looking forward to your leadership in the Solid Waste Division to help get that message out. Because you know as well as I do, sometimes it's not clear what comes from the different county departments. So I'm
Thank you.
hopeful you'll clear that up.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Yeah, it is nice to see you here, Mayor Okerlander and Councilmember Weiker. Well, thank you. I'm glad we were able to pass that resolution. Next on the agenda is a presentation on the King County Solid Waste Rate Restructure presented by Republic Services Municipal Manager Wendy Weiker and Republic Services Recycling Coordinator Natalie Caulkins.
Good evening, Mayor Herbig and council members. Thank you for your time tonight and congratulations on passing the RE+ pledge in one fell swoop and meeting. I'm here tonight to kind of back up the presentation that you just heard from the county and tell you what we're doing here at Republic Services to support zero waste goals and sustainability. So many of you know me in my personal volunteer work, but tonight I'm here on behalf of Republic Services. I'm Wendy Weiker, the Community Relations Manager for Republic, and I've been with Republic about 3 years. So I've learned everything there is to do and all the work we have to do going forward on recycling, because you're right, Councilmember Baker, there's a lot of confusion. We've been working on this a long time. So one of the main messages I have for you tonight is that Republic Services is your collection service provider through the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission and the franchise that we've shared with your city for decades. We are absolutely committed to the work that we do with the county and with our cities to meet those zero waste goals and circular economy objectives that we're all trying to work on locally, at the county, at the state level, and nationally, because we all know climate change and climate action is an imperative for all of us. So one word that I use all the time that I'm sure is not new to you guys is partnerships. It takes all of us working together, one door at a time, one multifamily property at a time, one garbage size container at a time. And we have a lot of work to do to meet these sustainability goals. And we have a lot of work to do to balance the rates that folks are paying, given what they pay for us to collect it and given what they pay King County to dispose of it at the landfill down in Maple Valley, that it's filling up really fast. And so RE+ is sort of an attempt by the county, thanks to Amy's leadership, to really bring recycling and diversion to the forefront. And it follows on the heels of the organics law that was passed last year. You guys might have heard about it as 1799. If you hadn't heard about it yet, you certainly will, because we have all levels of governments working to pull as much material out of the local landfill and into reuse in the first place. So that's the broad stroke of what we do at Republic Services with our cities and with our county. And I wanted to bring you guys up to date on a component of RE+, which is this rate restructure that King County has been working on for about 3 or 4 years. And then most notably in the last 2 years, we had a model come forward about how to take the rate that is paid at the scale house when trucks cross the line to dump the material picked up into 2 components. So King County is really trying to create decoupling, sustaining their infrastructure from the volume of material coming through from the curbs. So rate restructure is now kind of at the forefront, because all the cities and their haulers are working together to figure out how to update contracts accordingly. And for the city of Kenmore, we are doing that at the regulatory level with the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, again, given that franchise we have. So working really closely with Rob Karlinski and Nancy Meehan to work together on that. So you'll hear more about that in June. We think we're starting with contract cities because, as Amy mentioned, we have 38 cities here in King County and 3 different haulers. And Seattle is outside of our system, but those 38 cities and 3 haulers either have a UTC arrangement or a contract. We're starting with the contract cities first because those contracts are all different, whereas the UTC contracts are very similar because of that regulatory framework we operate under. But all of that work is being done to support this diversion work that we need to do. And we're excited to get there and move this right along because it meets your climate action goals. And the 10% utility tax that you guys just passed that takes effect on May 1st, and having a position dedicated to that will certainly help residents and businesses in Kenmore get to that. So a few statistics for you guys on that. We have 6,200 garbage and recycling customers in Kenmore. There are about 82 to 84 multifamily properties in Kenmore. We work with all of them door to door and through emails and through customer call centers and through community events. And the program that Natalie is going to tell you about after I'm done talking, in really reaching people where they are about what not to put in the blue bin, because while folks I think are well intended, there's a lot of wish cycling occurring where they put items in the blue bin that they think Republic Services can take the recycling center and sort through. And contrary to popular belief, we don't have a thrift store next to our recycling center. We can really only take the few key materials that are empty, clean, and dry that can run through our recycling center and be bundled at the end and given to producers who can then take that material and turn them back into packages and products that we all use and know every day. So with that, I just want you to know that we are on top of the rate restructure work with your staff. The organics diversion work is coming through that 1799 state law. That's implemented slowly over time. You'll hear more about that in 2024, but the key component to know about the organics diversion is that we are looking into whether we can create an ordinance in Kenmore to make organics collection mandatory through the UTC franchise. And our team is looking at that with yours, so we'll have an answer on that shortly. But most importantly, that state law is going to be in place, and there's a timeline associated with it that will help us all definitely get organics out of the landfill and into reuse through compost or through anaerobic digesters going forward. So with that, I'm going to leave the recycling expertise and presentation to my colleague, Natalie Caulkins. She's been doing this work 6 years longer than I have and has a lot more experience than I do in reaching customers where they are and how to do the right thing at the bin. So I'll be available later to answer questions, as will Natalie. And really thank you for your time and attention to this matter tonight. You guys are well ahead of a lot of other cities in this regard.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Wendy and everyone. Thank you, council members and Mayor Herbig for allowing us to give this presentation. I'm going to try to keep it under 10 minutes. All righty, 7:37, let's go. I started at Republic Services in 2019 in October, right before the pandemic. And before that, I worked at Kittitas County Solid Waste. I lived in Ellensburg at the time. So I have a little bit of experience in both the public sector and the private sector. But I've been a recycler all my life and an environmentalist. However, knowing what I know now about recycling from the industry perspective, I am a bit embarrassed with some things that even I did, because you're right, it is confusing and a lot of folks make mistakes out of good intentions. But first of all, I think the most important thing to know is, where does the recycling material go? And this is your MRF. This is the material recovery facility in the Soto district in Seattle. It's the Republic facility. All of your recyclables go there. The trucks come out there. We even get trucks from waste management areas, from ecology areas. It's the largest one in the Pacific Northwest. We process 55 tons of material every hour. It's a lot of material that we have coming in and going through, and we're trying to pull out the wrong items that for whatever reason ended up there. The number one problem that we have is plastic bags. And this is something that is true across all of the haulers. I sit in on the King County Recycle Right Consortium, which was started right after China's national sword policy was enacted. And so all of the haulers are there. Waste management is represented, ecology is there, and we talk about how to harmonize our list, how to harmonize our communications. And plastic bags is by and large the #1 problem. Once you get aside from the items that never should have been put in the recycling to begin with, there are still people out there who put food, who put dog poo, who put diapers in the recycling. And but as far as folks that are probably wish recycling or just don't know or don't understand the differences between the different plastics, plastic bags are the #1 problem that cause issues for us at the recycling facility. We have conveyor belts, we have sorting screens, we have optical sorters, we have employees who are out there to pick contamination out of the recycling. They try to get 60 to 70 picks per minute. The conveyor belts are moving at any rate of 150 to 315 feet per minute. So this volume of material and the amount of contamination kind of goes to answering the question of, which I get this question a lot, especially when I'm at the dog park, well, why can't you just rip the bag and shake the recycling out? We really don't have time for that. There's so much material that we need to move through. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. And sometimes, depending on the flow, we do run the same material over and over to try to extract everything, to try to recover everything that's valuable from that stream. But we really don't have time to rip open plastic bags. So if there's only one message that you take home, is that please don't put plastic bags in the recycling. They belong in the garbage or an alternative solution, such as the grocery store drop-off site. This is a video that I took at the MRF. The first step after we tip, we empty the truck, there's a big pile, then this loader takes a scoop and puts it in the hopper. And you can see, once I play the video, little bits are flying up here. The hopper is a rotating drum that tries to separate any compressed material and kind of fluffs the pile. So all of this equipment, which we've invested in since 1980, is all designed to separate out different types of materials so that we can get bales that are pure cardboard or as pure as possible. Clean milk jugs all together in a bale. So I'm going to play this video quick. Let me know if it doesn't work for you.
It looks like it's working.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you can kind of see the little bits going pew, pew, pew. That's the hopper fluffing and doing its work. Since China's national sword policy went into effect, we've really leaned in, not backed away from recycling, but leaned in investments in our infrastructure. We bought 2 optical sorters, and then we bought 2 more. So we have a total of 4 optical sorters. I want to say they were 1.1 million each. That's a lot of money to invest in a recycling system. We are very committed to that. The optical sorters, which I didn't choose to put a picture of it or a video of it in here because of the time constraint, they use an infrared light to detect the material type as it's flowing underneath the light. And then it coordinates that with a computer with an air puff to separate the desired material into one channel, and the other materials go into the other channel. But I want to talk about screens today because of the plastic bag question and the plastic bag issue. This video, I like this video, even though it's a cartoon, because it's from a company that manufactures equipment for recycling companies, for recycling centers. And this video shows how screens are meant to work in an ideal world where there aren't plastic bags in the recycling. The screens are designed to separate 3-dimensional materials from 2-dimensional materials. So the paper and the cardboard is meant to surf up and over. Will you play? I think it's thinking about it. Is meant to surf up and over the screens in a wave-like motion and allow the glass to get broken up by the discs into small pieces. Those get filtered out because their size can be broken down so small. And milk jugs, soda cans, water bottles, those are meant to fall through the gaps between the rotating rods, between these discs. So 3-dimensional from 2-dimensional, just like you can see. This is the ideal world, however. In the next screen, this is a video that I took in 2020. This is one of our operations supervisors, Randall, down at the recycling facility. Oh dear. And I actually was able to get up on top of the screen and get a view of our own recycling facility. I apologize for the skitsiness of it. There we go. So you can kind of see that there are a lot of plastic bags wrapped around here. When the plastic bags or film, bubble wrap, shrink wrap, hoses, wire hangers get wrapped around, they narrow the space between the rotating rods. And that either can jam the equipment eventually, and then we have to shut the whole line down because one conveyor belt and one machine feeds into another. Or they prevent the equipment from doing the work that it was designed to do, from being efficient. And it ends up keeping the bottles and cans and things in with the two-dimensional materials, which is not what it was meant to do. So it really inhibits our ability to recover as much as possible, which is valuable and a valuable resource from the stream. At the end of the day, the goal is to have bales of one type of material. We sell these onto Merlin Plastics in British Columbia. That's one of the big plastic buyers in the region. Norpac is one of the big paper mills. It's based out of Longview. Metal smelting has been done domestically for decades. And yet we still see a lot of these valuable things put into the garbage by the customers. And that is where my education program is focusing during these past 2 years through the revenue sharing agreement. Because Kenmore is part of the UTC area, we have a special fund paid for by the recyclables that customers put out. Customers get part of the revenue, and the other part is used for educational programs. And so these cart tags were developed with King County as part of the Recycle Right Consortium. There's the Recycle Right symbol down there. Like I said, all of the haulers are there. Some of the cities choose to send a representative as well. And we talk about what are the top problems and how can we best communicate those to the customers. So through this program, I purchased a bunch of cart tags, English on one side, Spanish on the other, and am able to fund consultants to go out and tag every single recycling cart in our UTC area, which is about 40,000 customers. We have done Kenmore, so if you have not received one of these tags, maybe check in with your child or your spouse who might have rolled the cart in and thrown the tag away without looking at it. Or if not, of course, I can send you another tag. But the message has also been sent out in the previous 2-year revenue sharing agreement. There was a bill insert sent out. Again, the collateral was designed in collaboration with the other haulers and with King County at the table. So that work of harmonizing messaging is going on and has been going on, especially since China's national sword policy. One thing I would say that Kenmore is a great ally and asset for, as an example to other cities, is how some cities, it seems, are not as willing to hear feedback that we, the MRF operators, pass on from our customers, the buyers. So the paper or the plastic manufacturing plant that we sell these bales to, when they tell us something like chips bags, Frito-Lay chips, candy wrappers, those sorts of things, when they tell us that that is really not valuable and they can't make anything out of it, those pellets, it's really hard to find other uses for them. We would like to be able to pass that information back upstream, in a sense, back to the customers. And sometimes some of our cities are more willing to modify the lists of what's acceptable based on that feedback chain than others. Kenmore has been a really great partner in this, but I have one city in mind where we got feedback from Strategic Materials, the only glass recycler in the region, that mason jars and Pyrex, that glass does not melt down at the same temperature or in the same way as your beer bottle or other glass. So the end market that we're selling it to complete the cycle of making new things out of it, they're telling us that they don't want mason jars, they don't want Pyrex mixed in there. It messes with their process. But there's been some difficulty in trying to get that message pushed out to the customer. So that's just an example of the kind of communication flow that I really appreciate out of the city of Kenmore. We were talking about diversion and reducing the volumes that are going into the landfill. Metals have been recyclable and recycled since World War II, before then, since the Bronze Age. And yet we still see soda cans in the garbage. Breaks my heart. So that is a focus of this revenue sharing agreement program, the education program, is to identify households, and all of these pictures are from Kenmore, identify these households where there are wasted or missed opportunities for recycling and try to intervene and try to figure out what is it that's keeping you from putting these very recyclable items into the recycling. Is it a distrust of the system? How can we persuade you that metal still has value, is domestically recycled? Cardboard is another really valuable material. Because the paper fibers are so long, it can be recycled over and over again. Paper itself is not infinitely recyclable. Every time it gets pulped, the fibers get cut shorter and shorter. At the end, the shortest fibers you have are like newspaper or egg cartons. They really can only be made into more newspaper or egg cartons or those paper trays that apples or peaches will come on. Those are made out of the very short paper fibers. But cardboard is a very long fiber. So there's a lot of potential to reuse it over and over again. This person put this cardboard box in the garbage. Here are some other examples, also from Kenmore. There's a soda can. There's a couple of PET bottles. These are very valuable. There's another soda can. So we don't just need to look in the recycling and try to reduce the contamination there or pull out things that could have been reused. We've had wedding dresses come through the recycling at the MRF. We've had bowling balls. They used to keep a collection of bowling balls. Ice skates, all sorts of things end up in the recycling. But there's also the garbage that we could be looking at for opportunities to reduce our impact on the environment and preserve natural resources for future generations. I'm assuming that everyone in the room is on the same page as far as understanding that when we make something from a recycled product instead of from a raw ore or oil that's extracted or trees, it uses less energy, produces fewer greenhouse gas emissions and less water in many cases. There's a lot of benefits to making things out of recycled product rather than extracting natural resources. I'm assuming that everyone's on the same page about that, but if you're not, I would love to have the opportunity to go into that a little bit in more detail with you. Like I said, plastic bags are the #1 contaminant. There is a lot of labeling, stamping with that recycle triangle or the recycling number. And we, the MRF, don't have a lot of control over that. The manufacturers don't ask us before they stamp that thing on. The manufacturers might be, who knows where. So there is a challenge there, which is why we say, ignore the recycling number or the symbol, recycle by shape. Bottles, jugs, tubs. Those are the things that the screens can separate out. I took this picture of the Glad recycling bag at a Fred Meyer in Redmond. Made me so angry. And then this picture actually is not from Kenmore. This picture of the contents of the recycling cart is, I think it's from Boarts or Hunts Point. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, Kenmore is not unique or especially bad at recycling. You have the same struggles that everyone else has. But hopefully, at least the folks in the room after this presentation will not bag the recyclables or put plastic bags in the recycling. Every year, I design this, I publish this, I get this sent out, mailed out to everyone in our our UTC areas, including Kenmore. So if you haven't received one of these, maybe we don't have your address, or maybe it got mixed in with junk mail and got thrown away on accident, or that spouse or child threw it away, who knows what. but we can mail you a new one. This is also available on our website and has the what goes where guide. I think where a lot of the confusion comes from is when people start asking what if questions, or they start getting creative, going outside of what's listed there. The list of what we can find buyers for, markets where they're making something new out of it because there's demand for 100% recycled paper or whatever the product is. It's listed right here. It's when people try to get creative with it that we run into problems, or, well, it depends. And we can get as much into the weeds with it as you want. I would love to do a whole hour of just answering your questions about why not cartons? Why not aluminum foil? What's the problem with aluminum foil? I would love to answer your questions about that. I think I'm running out of time, however. Compost, similarly, I partner with Cedar Grove to edit this and make sure that this is working with their process. I do multifamily outreach. I have been to every single one of those 83 multifamily properties in Kenmore multiple times, actually, doing outreach, updating stickers, knocking on doors, doing door hangers, calling property managers, upgrading and increasing the size of their recycling container, which has its pros and cons. I think Patty mentioned earlier about customers cost saving by getting their garbage container smaller. And that's a great idea if they don't put the garbage into the recycling, if they actually change their buying, consuming, and disposal patterns to accommodate that, which is not always what we see. Sometimes people cram so much, even good recyclables, into the recycling cart that we can't empty it. You know, the truck is there, he's got the arm, he's shaking it, the whole truck is shaking, and it's just crammed in there and we can't get it out. So there are pros and cons to most things, but I am intimately familiar with all of your multifamily properties in Kenmore. And this is my intern, Madri, who I had this summer. She's doing her bachelor's in sustainability at Cascadia College, first one in her family to do anything other than computer science. And she is such a hard worker, and she's so passionate about climate change and sustainability. I just love working with her, so I have these pictures of her in here. Anyway, I think I've gone over time, but I just wanted to leave with a final thought. I like this image a lot, although it can be sobering. It just goes to that idea of recycling is valuable. The things that are on the list are recyclable. I see the money coming in. I know that we find markets for them, which means that there's demand out there. It does fluctuate, it does change. But if we just stick to the annual guide, it doesn't need to be overwhelmingly confusing. And if you ever have any questions, you probably all have my Natalie Caulkins or N Caulkins at Republic Services, but I also have this recycling info at Republic Services email as well. Okay, I'm done.
And I'll just wrap us up for the last minute and say you guys can get engaged with this work by joining the Municipal SWAC. Once a month, the cities get together with King County to talk about all things solid waste. There's also the King County SWAC that Mayor Baker referred to earlier. I happen to chair that. And then the K4C is also a great resource for cities to collaborate on all of that work. And as we all know, Sound Cities Association is also bringing people together around work with the county and work around sustainability, as well as your representatives down in Olympia. So there are lots of ways to get engaged. Pick and choose where you can, and your voice and your engagement matters in this work.
Well, thank you both for this rich conversation. I know we have some questions. We'll start with Councilmember Shrubnik.
Thanks, it's very informative. I'm pretty conscientious about reading things that come to our house around this, but I learned some things, which is scary because that means most people don't know them too. So on that note, love the pretty annual graphic, but it is complicated. And if we want, if our goal is increased participation and more recycling, we need to simplify. And if there's any ways to do that, I think, and if one of the big things that is coming through the stream is plastics that shouldn't. So plastic wrap, for example, you said in plastic bags. Is there a way, for example, to partner with Ridwell to, I mean, I'm not going to buy another subscription. I'm going to try and use my bags. But if there was a little bin that said, put your plastic bags here, and it hung like it used to 20 years ago, like the glass one did. We had a separate bin 20 years ago for glass recycling. It hung inside the recycling bin. I mean, I'm just making things up here. But I guess what I'm saying is, the haulers, you have an opportunity to maybe partner with Ridwell to bring these things at a lower cost and more systematically to consumers to get more participation and to get the right things in the right stream. So I would just encourage more creative thinking about how to simplify it for the end user in order to get higher participation.
So totally agree with you on that front. And as you said, Ridwell is a subscription service. It's between $12 and $18 a month, I think, for whatever stops they can make. And so the price points for that are tough. As you know, rates are going up everywhere all the time. What we do at scale with that building that Natalie pointed out, it's running 50 tons an hour. That's the equivalent of 10 recycling trucks, right? So the scale that we move this material through, given that we're a resource for the county, and we take material from outside the county as well for recycling. And I'll just add waste management and ecology also have MRFs. There's a lot of recycling happening in the region. And we partner with our grocery stores. We partner with promoting Ridwell as sort of the added on recycling if you have the discretionary income to do that. At scale, we just don't have the ability to take those plastic bags. We don't have it in our MRF. We don't have it at our trucks able to do that yet. And you mentioned glass. That's the material we're more focused on at the moment because we have one recycling center for glass in the region and it's having challenges taking the material. In fact, we end up paying them to take the glass and rather than reuse it, they end up crushing it sometimes and putting it in public works projects. So what we really, I think the bigger bang for the buck on the next commodity to look at is glass. And we talked about extended producer responsibility and manufacturers being responsible for the materials. Glass is right for that. And again, the question would be, would we pick it up and take it somewhere or do we create depositories at grocery stores, at libraries, wherever consumers are taking their materials for other activities that they do, right? So this is a complicated system. There's all manner of packaging. There's all manner of messages out there. Plastics alone, we could take an hour to have Natalie explain the 7 numbers, what the chasing arrows mean, where they all go, how we bundle it into 3 different commodity bales to try to get them out somewhere to be reused. And then Republic Services is doubling down on plastics by building a polymer center in Las Vegas where all of the plastics from the region up and down the West Coast are going to end up in Las Vegas so that we can right cycle the plastics rather than have it be downgraded from plastic down to carpet or fabric. We're going to be able to turn water bottles back into water bottles. That's a huge investment of a ton of money to try to create a market here at home and double down on our sustainability commitments that we've made as a company nationwide to really kind of solve the plastics problem because we need more of that virgin material for manufacturers and producers that want to package it with the recycled content they're promising their customers as well. So there's a lot of innovation happening. There's a lot of attention on this. China's sword was just the start of this country needing to do more of our own reduce, reuse, recycle. And King County's RePlus work is a huge step in that direction. And it's setting an example, not just for Washington, but for the country on what the private sector can do with the public sector in changing the way we can help people behave differently at home and at work to put the right materials in the right bins that can actually create that circular economy we all want at a scale that isn't going to send all of us spending hundreds of dollars a month on this work on top of everything else that we're already paying for. So I hear you on the Ridwell, I hear you on the plastic bags. I hope you hear me on the glass. It's complicated, it's hard, everybody's busy, and we are doing what we can where we can with our partnerships locally, regionally, and statewide to try to get there and make it as simple as possible.
Okay, Mayor Herbig.
Hi, I appreciate your time today and the presentation. I have heard from people who I, think are generally well-informed, smart people who tell me things like, well, recycling isn't something that's actually happening. Everything is being shipped off to China and burned. How do we combat that narrative so that people will actually trust that they're recycling is actually being recycled?
That is an excellent question and exactly the target of the next Recycle Right task force messaging. We've been working on these videos collaboratively, all of the haulers there, going over the different iterations, the script, the images being used. You're absolutely right. A couple of years ago, I had some funds to put out Facebook ads, just reminding folks empty, clean, and dry. And a lot of the comments, granted it's Facebook, but a lot of the comments were, oh yeah, rinse it out so they can throw it in the garbage or throw it in the ocean or take it over to China, right? We're not shipping plastics overseas, period. We haven't been shipping plastics overseas since 2019. Merlin up in British Columbia is huge, and they have a great system. They have 13 optical sorters. I told you those cost $1.1 million each. That's where most of our plastics go, not to give away our company secrets. But yes, Merlin in British Columbia, and I've done a tour of them. And actually, I was talking about the different inputs that we got. So this was kind of funny, interesting to me. Towards the end of the tour of Merlin Plastics, Tony points at the bale that has a lot of Frito-Lay chip bags and candy wrappers and things. And he says, yeah, that's our ship mix. We can't really make anything out of that. I hope there's a bleepy thing for this. But that kind of information is really useful to have from the folks that are taking the plastics and trying to make something out of it, trying to make pellets out of it. He doesn't have a lot of customers who want to take it's called a laminate material out of that. So the answer is yes, the recycling is happening. But when people ask me, is it actually getting recycled? I think the better question is, what are you putting in there? That's the first question. What are you putting in there will tell you whether it can be recycled. Are you putting milk jugs in? Yes, please bring me milk jugs all day long. Water bottles, soda bottles, all the metal cans. I have met people doing these virtual presentations who don't know that soup cans can be recycled. And as you can see from the pictures, there are a lot of metal cans still ending up in the garbage. And I like to say that, or bring out that, so aluminum is made from bauxite. That's one of the ores that it's made from. And that's mined out of tropical and subtropical regions. So there's a social equity and justice aspect of it when we think about our responsibility as global citizens as well. Sorry, that was a long answer to your good question.
And a short answer is, Mayor Herbig, we have the data. We know what we collect. We know where the contamination levels are, and we know what goes to end market. So if you really want to get nerdy, we have the data. We share it with King County. Your regulator, the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, absolutely holds us to that standard, and we appreciate that, and we aspire to that standard as well. We want to reduce contamination. We want to reduce materials going to the landfill. That's a big part of what we do. So look at the data, it's there, and articles that point the other way don't do us all any favors, because it undermines the integrity of the system that we've all been working on for 50 years.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Baker.
So we're going to be shipping some of our recyclables to Las Vegas.
We will be shipping them, Mayor. Sorry, Councilmember Baker.
Will.
Yes, no,
so
this
you
is
collect from our area and you then ship.
Yes. So
no,
go ahead, sir.
That's fine, Wendy. So the other thing I wanted to know was paper products in the food recycling. If basically it's had food in it, we should throw it into the recycling bin, but not egg cartons.
Okay, I think we're getting down into the weeds, which I would love to do, but I want to respect everybody's time. The short answer is yes, egg cartons can go in the compost. Other food soiled papers, you got to be careful, because there's a lot of labeling out there that says biodegradable or compostable, and it may not be compatible with Cedar Grove's system. So that's part of that feedback loop. When Cedar Grove tells us something, we try to update our educational materials. For example, a few years ago, we had to remove shredded paper from what's acceptable in the compost because Cedar Grove was telling us they're receiving too many credit card offers that people shred, all those little plastic fake cards, your name here. And also junk mail glossy, shiny, that's coated with plastic. That's what makes it glossy and shiny. Dixie plates that are coated, that's what they're coated with. They're not coated with wax. They're coated with polyethylene. And of course, Cedar Grove doesn't want that in their compost.
Wendy, can you please send me that sheet of recyclable products, please?
Absolutely.
Mail you
Thank you.
one. Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. It used to be so easy to recycle your glass or recycle your aluminum cans. And as you know, we have more people using glass-based products, whether you're drinking from your glass materials or our cans. So why our community is trying to get those into the glass bin or recycle appropriately, it doesn't seem like the clarity of information necessarily always meets our customer. And additionally, when we look at our multifamily living situations, we know that the larger developers rely upon trash compactors, and they may be ordering the wrong size for the amount of population they have. Then garbage bags end up in the recycling that Republic Service is then picking up. So how can we address these problems? And I have additional prompt.
So multifamily outreach is Natalie's expertise, so I'll be quiet.
Oh, it's all good. So I have personally contacted all of the property managers in Kenmore over the last 3 years. I have talked to them about contamination. I have offered multilingual translated guides. I have 11 or 13 different languages. I do a site visit. I look and see, I ask them if their service is enough. There is an aspect of human behavior that is going to be a constant challenge. This is just part of being human. But we do have reusable tote bags that customers can carry their recyclables to the recycling with. We've hired consultants over the years to analyze and test out different ways of doing outreach, different ways of encouraging clean recycling to figure out what works and what doesn't. There are slotted lids. I've offered the slotted lid program to a lot of multifamily properties. There are pros and cons to them as well. One of the benefits of the slotted lids is that it doesn't allow you to shove a big bag of bagged garbage or bagged recycling through it. You have to shake things out loosely into it. Sometimes residents will just leave whatever it is, garbage or recycling, sitting at the container rather than do the right thing and put the recycling through the slot. It is a constant opportunity for improvement. That is very true. And as far as recycling being too complicated, our lives have gotten too complicated, right? Like you used to not be able to buy chips that had been made a month ago in Illinois and gotten them and they're still fresh. You used to have fresh chips off the street or none at all, or you had to make them yourself. We're dealing with a lot of variety of different materials and packaging that have a benefit. They keep the chips fresh, they keep them crispy and flavored and tasting good. We do have a Recycling Simplified website. It's just called recyclingsimplified.com to try to bring the simplicity back to recycling. That's the Republic Services website. It has education in English and Spanish for the office, for your home. It has videos and activities, curriculum for children of all ages. All the grade levels have particular videos there, as well as classroom activities. And I will put that link in the chat, recyclingsimplified.com.
And I'll add, we're trying to make it easier as an industry by working with our partners to have a simplified list as well as similar cart colors so that all recycling bins are blue, not gray or black, right? So if we can be consistent where people live, work, and play, the cues will be more natural, and hopefully repetition, we can make progress on getting that diversion rate from 50-ish% up to 70%.
I appreciate that. The other thing is glass is so recyclable. You can recycle glass many times over. I noticed that visiting Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, they're utilizing crushed glass and concrete aggregate as another way of recycling. It's actually very attractive and highly effective. So maybe we can look at exploring these kinds of opportunities for our state. If we can do it with oysters, I'm sure we can do it with glass. Thank you.
I think that is actually going on. And you're making a very good point. At least it's one more use for it and it's not going into the landfill. Another possible use for it that the glass is sometimes used for is alternative daily cover. So at landfills, you have to have 6 inches of either dirt or alternative daily cover. When I worked in Kittitas County, sometimes we would use compost that came back too high in pesticides because of whatever the material was that came in. It wasn't suitable to be resold as compost. So we would use that as alternative daily cover at the landfill. Glass can be used that way. Is it as good as recycling it back into a glass bottle? Probably not as good. Is it better than putting it in the landfill? Yes, probably. I also sit in on the Department of Ecology's Recycling Development Center, which was established in 2019 in response to the changes in the global recycling industry to try to stimulate local markets in Washington that make use of recycled products, recycled feedstocks. And we visited a Rotary Club project in Chelan. Talk about an isolated location. Glass is a very heavy material. Transporting that from Chelan over to Seattle, where the only glass recycler is, it doesn't make climate sense, much less monetary sense. So they have this glass crusher and they are looking to use that in concrete projects, just like you mentioned.
Thank you. And the last thing is, when I visited the Cedar Grove site, I learned about the aspect of recycling compostable silverware, plates, bags, and why that's not a standard part of the garbage service we have in Kenmore. It is a contracted service Seattle has that's inclusive of their contract. Can you explain that difference? Or is it ordinance difference?
I think it's an ordinance level difference. I don't know if Kenmore itself could enact such an ordinance, but Wendy?
Yeah, so I was going to say currently in Kenmore, yard waste is voluntary, and Rob and Nancy on your staff are working with my UTC lead to see if we can get an ordinance in Kenmore so that you can make yard waste collection mandatory, and then figure out what rate model would have to go with that and do that work. And that would actually be ahead of the state law around 1799. You're gonna have to do that anyway eventually, so they're just getting a head start on it, and it'll certainly help you guys meet your sustainability and zero waste goals that much sooner. And all that material would go to Cedar Grove, where they're already composting up in Everett, so it's not that far of a haul. And if you haven't been to the Cedar Grove facility, I encourage those of you who haven't to go. It's really fascinating to see the scale at which they take yard waste and food waste and turn it into mulch. And I believe you guys signed the procurement ordinance. It's a part of the organics law, which means all the material picked up in Kenmore is going to come back to Kenmore as compost.
Thank you. And that's for the curbside pickup. And of course, we know that we have a local Cedar Grove site here in Kenmore. So families can drop off a truckload of yard waste for about under $20 and even pick up bagged organic compost if needed. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank Wendy and Natalie for coming tonight. This was a much longer discussion than I expected. And I think part of that is like the passion that you have for this work, I think really comes through, especially your knowledge and passion for recycling, Natalie, I think is really appreciated. I have a couple of questions, and one is, what kind of outreach do you do to youth to help shape behavior for long-term? I'll start with that one.
That's an excellent question. So King County has the Green Team program, and I have reached out to schools and I have given presentations to schools who are interested in having me come instead of the King County Green Team program. There is room for further collaboration with King County's Green Team between Republic and them. But there is a well-established, robust program there already. I will say that my most recent presentation, it was at Shadow Lake Elementary in the Tahoma School District, and I showed the exact same videos that I showed you folks of the screens, and the kids got it immediately. They just picked it up so fast. They're like, oh, so then the things can't fall through because the gaps get narrower. It was amazing. Anyway, I would welcome more opportunities to partner with Kenmore Youth.
And I would add that we do outreach to the school districts and the classes and the schools in particular, and also on the operations side, what we can do to help them do diversion in the cafeterias. So we approach schools at 2 levels and see when they'll let us in, and badger them every now and then, because as you can imagine, they're busy as well.
Great. The other question I have is for, like, clearly just through this conversation, there have been a lot of questions, but also a wide range. I think you can tell, like in my household, like I am a habitual recycler. I am the annoying mom who goes into the trash. And if I see something in there, I will make my kids come back and take it out, put it in the sink and wash it. But one question that I have is like the level of cleanliness or purity. For myself, sometimes I wonder if like that soap bottle that I've washed, or the oil, or my olive oil container, or, you know, if there's a little plastic film on a plastic cup, like I will wash it and put it in recycling, but maybe that's not pure enough. Could you talk about that a little bit?
The rule of thumb that we say is a teaspoon of liquid. You don't need to run it through the washing machine, or sorry, the dishwasher, or use a hair blow dryer. I've met people who do that, or lay it out. They fill up their counter with it. You know, a teaspoon, I would say for this group. You know, if you give folks an inch and they take a mile, then maybe you don't want to tell them that. And as far as the life cycle analysis, the value of the amount of water that you're using to wash out an olive oil bottle or a peanut butter jar, I haven't done the research on that to see where it stops making sense. I think it comes to a point where you're comparing apples and oranges. Okay, this uses more water, but this one creates more greenhouse gases. Well, they're both essential for life. So I would not fret over that as much. I think that's a waste of bandwidth and energy. We only have so much space to worry about and care about and be passionate about things. And I don't know that that's the best place to direct that energy.
Great, I appreciate that perspective, and really look forward to helping educate our residents and seeing how we might be able to reduce contamination and get more, divert more into the recycling. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Well, Wendy, Natalie, thank you so much for this robust discussion. It's such a huge topic. I consider myself good at recycling, and then I'm like, oh, I missed that. The answer, yeah. So I'm just thankful for. Oh, it looks like we have another question.
We're also happy to take this offline. Anyone that wants to follow up, please just reach out directly, and we're happy to take it offline and get you down to the recycling center, see it firsthand.
Absolutely.
Anyways,
Yeah, and as climate action, environmental stewardship are our #1 priority in Kenmore. This is so critical and important. So more. I'm dreaming of waste ambassadors, so people can really understand what to do, because it is complicated. And thank you. Thank you. Councilmember File, did you have a question?
Yes, on April 22nd, we are celebrating Earth Day in Kenmore at Kenmore Rhododendron Park. And we have a bunch of vendors coming to help bring, community education and fun to Kenmore. And I certainly hope Republic Services wants to join that fun. So I invite you to be one of our vendors for the day. I hope you reach out to our staff. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
And even if you can't, it'd be great to get, 150, 200 of those, what can be recycled. And we can just lay them on a table. Thanks.
10-4.
Thank you again. Okay.
Thank you
Next,
for having us.
yeah, we're very thankful, and I'm going to be reusing all of my bottles. I'm telling you. Anyway, I'm more inspired to reuse than ever after this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Where's the Fun? After that, we will take a 10-minute break.
All right, well, thank you. Well, this is a really fun item. We love having Where's the Fun on the agenda. Thank you to the council for suggesting that. So this item that I'm going to share tonight, there's a picture I think Michelle's going to show on the screen. This came from our very own Rita Moreno, brought to our attention that there's a really fun event happening this weekend. The Family Jewels Kenmore Ball Crawl is going to be this Saturday, April 8th from 1 to 5. And this is a really important cause. It helps local families who've endured childhood cancer. And the Family Jewels Kenmore Ball Crawl is going to happen between Cairn Brewing, 192 Brewing, and Stoop, again from 1 to 5 on Saturday. And also you can enjoy delicious coffee from Java Janae. And the ball crawl enables the Family Jewels Foundation to provide college scholarships to students who've had a sibling with cancer, as well as to help support the University of Washington Men's Fertility Preservation Fund for men about to undergo chemotherapy who also want to preserve their ability to have a family. So a really fun event happening for a good cause on Saturday. So thanks to Rita for bringing that to our attention.
Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Unless there are any objections, the council will recess for 10 minutes.
No, we get to listen to John. One says no.
Well, you know what you can do with that? Just.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Kenmore City Council will return to order.
Oh, that's a good one.
On that note, now we have our study session on the Kenmore Municipal Code Title 12 updates presented by Engineering Director John Vicente.
Good evening, Mayor Council. Yep, there we go. There's my presentation. Tonight, I will be talking about the Title 12 update. The Title 12 is a pretty extensive section, and so with a lot of changes that we're proposing to make. And so I split this up into 3 separate discussions to make it a lot easier for you to digest. Getting to Title 12, what's in there? So this is really everything related to the public right-of-way, what we do with it, how we use it, what we authorize. But there also is a section there that talks about permitting on city property, like City Hall and our parks and things like that. Why are we updating Title 12? It's been a very long time. I think some of these have been at least 20 years since we've touched onto them. We need to bring them up to current state requirements. We need to update them to reflect our current standards and policies, clarify existing code requirements and closing gaps, adding some new code language that we don't have in there currently. And then, of course, just formatting and organizing to match other sections of our code, updating terms and definitions, and then improving the flow of the sections. So in general, the entire title, I've made a lot of grammatical corrections and edits. I've consolidated the definitions into the front to match what we do with the rest of our code. Text has been moved to more logical locations for better flow. Defined terms are now italicized. That's what we do throughout our code, and it wasn't done in 12, so I made that consistent with the rest of it. Renaming some terms to be consistent with other documents. So like our road standards, our pedestrian facilities plan, just kind of making those things sink in. And then I renamed the actual title to Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Spaces, because that kind of made more sense as to what this title was about. So what I'm going to do with the presentation is I'm going to try and hit the highlights of those things that I think are most important that the council should know about. But if you're interested in learning about all of the changes, there was the attached red line version and the clean copy for within the agenda bill for you to read if you want to get more detail as to what actually is being proposed. So tonight I'm going to be covering chapters 12.05 through 12.55. Pretty simple stuff. There's not a whole lot of major changes that were made in most of these sections, with the exceptions of 1235 and 1255. So most of these will go pretty quickly. I intend to take a break between each chapter so that you can ask any questions or have any comments before we go into the next chapter. Chapter 12.05 are the general provisions. The general, and this is pretty much gives the general intent of the title. It's where our definitions are located. And then it also talks about provisions for encroachments within the right-of-way, which it establishes that if you're in the right-of-way, we have the right to tell you to get out of the right-of-way. What's changed within the section, for encroachments in the right-of-way, I included private property. The previous, the current code says utilities and equipment, and I wanted to be more clear that it's actually utilities and facilities and private property, so that we have the ability to, if someone's in the right-of-way that shouldn't be there, we can tell them that you need to get out of the right-of-way. I've exempted city work from obtaining permits. They're not exempt from the title. They're just exempt from having to actually apply for a permit. Added 17 new definitions, and then several definitions were revised. Any questions on that section?
Councilmember Shrevenick.
I don't have questions on this section, but as I kind of emailed earlier, I'm wondering if we can just focus on the 90% of this is cleanup, as you said. I mean, if you could maybe just, highlight any things that are policy decisions, because I'm not sure. I didn't see hardly any on them, but yeah. So
And I try to do that, for example, within this section, including private property would be a policy decision if council wants us to be more direct in enforcing the use of the right of way and getting private improvements out of the right of way. So I was looking at it in terms of what would influence, our policymaking decisions. And so that's why I include that. This section is a little bit different because it's the general provisions. The rest of the sections, I'm getting more into things that I believe are policy driven and not technical. So. But again, I'll be going pretty quickly through this. So hopefully I won't take an hour and a half.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, what are we going to do about the encroachments?
That depends on what the encroachment is and when we encounter it. Right now, we don't have a policy to explore the entire right-of-way, define encroachments and get them out because we just don't have the resources for that. But if we have a capital project or if we are out there and we see something that we consider to be a safety concern, then we will act on that. But we're not aggressively going after folks typically. So.
Okay, I know when we did the park up in the summit, we ran across a number of encroachments into public right of way, but we've done nothing, I guess. So we won't do anything unless it poses a safety hazard.
A safety hazard, or if we have a project coming through, if we need the space for some public use, okay, then we will aggressively go after that.
Thank you.
Go to the next section. The official street section. This section talks about just how we use our street section. It authorizes the use of street maps and also talks about the King County transfer of streets. Within this section, I'm repealing the section that talks about us having to maintain and keep paper maps. We're going all electronic, and so we're getting rid of that. And then making a change to delegate the authority from the council to the city manager to update the street maps. I'm deleting the ordinance requirement. It currently requires us to have an ordinance to make any changes to our street system, our street maps. Any questions on?
Councilmember Marshall.
Would we retain some paper map anyway, even though not required? Like say even just printing something out might be necessary in case there was some emergency.
If we need to print maps, we can. And we currently have maps printed on our walls within City Hall. What the section requires is that we have to have paper maps. We actually have to have a paper map for people to view and look at, whereas now we just provide them electronic maps, but we do keep paper ones. So.
Mayor Herbig.
Yeah, I was just curious, what weight do the official city maps have as far as from a policy standpoint? So the taking of the power from the council and giving that to the city manager, what implications does that have if the official map is changed, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So if I understand correctly, what the section says is that if we want to change a maps and as it relates to the RCW, then that has to go through ordinance. And what the RCW says is that we have to identify our streets per the street designation listed in the RCW, which is arterials, collectors, or local access roads. If we decide to make a change to a road, say through our comp plan, then once we make those changes to the maps, we don't have to do an ordinance because we've already got authority elsewhere. That's how I understand it.
So the council would still be deciding which streets are arterials and collector, those various categories. Is that correct?
Yes, because that's derived through our comp plan, through our transportation element says which roads are classified as such. If we want to make a change to that, then we have to go through and make a modification to that portion of the element.
Okay, thank you.
12.15 is street closures and load restrictions on streets. This establishes how we close roads and when we can close them. I added a provision for allowing emergency vehicles access through closed roads that currently is not in there. Added a provision to allow for street closures to conform for weather, inclement weather, to conform to 12.65. And I also added some clarification requiring notification to North Shore School District. And that's really more of a making it clear as to when we have to notify them. Right now, it is stating that we have to know them 1 p.m. the day before. And I clarified that to be a business day. So any questions there? 12.20, no policy changes here, but I felt it was important to note that we're taking the West Samash River Bridge off of the code. So got to celebrate it every chance we get. I'll assume there's no questions on that section. 1235, this is where we're going to get into some nitty gritty. There were a lot of significant changes we made to 1235. This is the section that establishes the rules for the right of way and how we are able to, what we can permit and how we permit. So the first section, 1235.20, is permit requirements. We added the unimproved right of way. So currently our code doesn't have, it's silent on what you do with the unimproved sections of the right of way. So we added that and required that portion of the right of way to be permitted for any kind of use. We've exempted city project activities from permitting. So for example, if a utility is doing work for a city project during certain times, they may not have to get a permit. There's a different process that we're letting them follow. And we're also clarifying when a right-of-way permit may be consolidated into another permit. So to provide for expediency for developers so that they don't have to get extra permits when it isn't necessary. Then 1235.25, time limit on applications. We added conditions that applications may only be extended during certain times. And this is conforming more with how we deal with other permits within the city. 1235.05, we've added application fees, or this is the application fees. We added restrictions on objects in the right of way. So reducing the buffer from 2 feet from the curb, from the edge of pavement, for example. If somebody wants to put in a utility pole or a pole, then we're telling them that you have to be within a certain distance from the curb to do that. We added site distance restrictions and other public hazard and city maintenance impacts to that. So these are things that cannot be in the right of way. 1235.40, this is the limited permit. We added a one-time 6-month extension. So if the permit expires, they can only extend it for one period for 6 months, then they have to get a new permit after that. We changed the type of activity. So the types of permits, the activities for the permits were spelled out, and we've changed which activity goes under which permit. And the reason for doing that is for the permit expiration and the types of activities were more consolidated them to reflect the similarities. So type A permit is really for changes made to the right of way. A type B permit is more for if they're doing some restrictions in the right of way, but they're not changing it. And then the type C permit is if they're closing the right of way for like block parties or the farmer's market. And so we added those term limits for those. And then I added exemptions for getting permits, mailbox replacements, maintenance activities, and maintenance activities specifically for private property owners who are doing maintenance within the right of way. Technically, they'd have to get a permit. So I'm adding that they don't have to get a permit to go out there and prune the shrubs or something like that. And then other temporary activities as approved by the city to get an exemption. Then 1235.50 permit access. I removed the limitation on duration. It specifically stated that the access has to be at least a year long. And I'm allowing people, if they want to do say a 6-month access, that's allowable. So it just depends on their situation. So adding more flexibility to that. 35055 is permit encroachment. I removed the minimum limitation requirement on the duration. So this is similar to the access where the encroachment can only last for so long. So I made a change with that. 1235075 covenant. I included covenants for the limited right-of-way permits. Right now, covenants are only required for, I believe, type A permits, but I'm requiring them for all types of permits. Adding a provision for removing of permitted improvements, meaning that if they put something in the right-of-way and they put a covenant together, if they want to remove it, they're going to have to pay. They're going to have to pay the cost to have that removed, since it's their property that we allowed in the right-of-way. And then I added a notary requirement to that. 1237 or 1235, 110, 120, we added insurance indemnification and performance guarantees. Those were not in there, and this is consistent with the rest of our other permits. And so we're going to be requiring contractors to provide that bit of protection for the city, since they are working within the right-of-way or doing activities. Any questions on 1235?
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, just going back a little ways to 3505055 and 75. I think just I think it's the previous slide. I guess I'm not understanding the significance of the covenant versus the permit. Maybe that's just me. And what do we mean by permit on access, removing limitation on duration? I think those need a little bit more explanation for us to understand what those are, and the same with 55.
Sure. Just gonna open them up so that I can verify what it says. So within the permit access, so this is of course a permit that allows the contractor or allows somebody to use the right-of-way for access. So this is only for maybe unimproved right-of-way or for excess right-of-way that we're not using. And what the current code says is that that they can only get this permit if they are going to use that space for more than a year. And so I removed that limitation, saying that it doesn't have to be more than a year, it can be less than that. With the permit encroachment, this is, say somebody wants to put a dumpster in the right of way to help with demolition of some work they're doing. This one also was only allowed if they were going to be doing it for more than a year. So I'm allowing them to have something in the right of way for 3 months.
Okay. So in the previous version, they only needed a permit if they were going to be doing the activity for more than a year?
The way this reads is they're
Previously.
Yeah, they're only able to get a permit if the activity is longer than a year.
Okay, so regardless of the duration, they would have had to apply for a permit, but you weren't going to give it to them previously unless they were doing it for more than a year.
That's what it says.
That's definitely seems odd. Okay, and then the significance of the covenant.
So the permit is a temporary short-term mechanism for what they're doing. The covenant is long-term. It's typically recorded on their title. And so if they do improvements, it goes on the title, carries the title, and then if they remove the improvements, then it comes off. Any other questions? Nope. 12.40 is the permit system for use of city real property like City Hall or the parks. What's changed, I've added a clarification for special use permit. There was no definition in there for what that meant. And so I identified that as activities that someone might want to use, say someone's going to be working on their fence, but they need access from the park. That would be a special use permit, not to be confused with our special events permit. There was no definition as to what it meant, so that's why I added that. I added an expiration to it and also added language for how you can extend it if you wanted to. And then I added 12.4.110 added permit fees. There were no permit fees for that permit, so I added those. Any questions on 1240? 1245, complete streets. This is our complete streets policy. What's changed here is within the complete streets policy, we identify certain tools that we can use for traffic calming. I removed those tools and made it more generic so that we have more flexibility in what we want to utilize without having to change our code. I added the importance of ped bike comfort. There's a lot of emphasis on safety, but I've added comfort in there because it's about the best way that we can provide one of the ways of making people want to bike. You know, you do have safety, but if it's not comfortable, they may not want to do it. So I added that in there as a criteria for consideration when we start looking at these bike facilities. Added the ADA guidelines as guidance. Those were not in there. And then I expanded the exemptions for having to do complete streets. So if there's a public safety risk, if there's minor pavement markings, or if the action would have adverse impacts to the disadvantaged community, then they would be exempt from the complete streets policy. Questions?
Maintenance is not included then.
Maintenance would not be included because maintenance is technically not changing anything. They're just upkeeping or repairing. So it's really geared towards changes and improvements that are being made. So if Jennifer were to propose some maintenance activity that's going to create some changes, we would want to look and see, is there a way that we can incorporate something from the complete streets in there, but typically that isn't what happens. A good example of how we're doing this is we have to do some restriping. We're going to be discussing some of this restriping with you next week, and as part of that, we are looking at a way to incorporate some of the complete street policy in that restriping. So.
I'm looking in particular to the extra maintenance that is going to be required here for all the planting strips that have been added. That's a significant amount of labor, and I'm wondering, where is that being covered if it's not here in this section?
So the maintenance of the right-of-way, of course, is covered in 1270.
Okay.
And I will be covering that at a later date.
Fine.
And that maintenance, the way it's written in the code, is the adjacent property owner is responsible for maintaining that, with the city, of course, maintaining certain locations within the city for maintenance, and that cost gets put into our budget and is accounted for during each budget cycle. But in terms of the landscaping, that would be, discussion with council when we get to that section, because that's kind of
fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. I just remember as a kid growing up having to maintain that portion, and it seems like that's going back to the homeowner where it rightfully belongs. We'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah. Save that discussion for there, because I'm also asking our operations manager, our director, to be there for the conversation, because she'll be able to help answer some of those questions.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, this is great. I would like to see actually the table of traditional and modern kept. And we can, it shouldn't be limiting. We just say, the types of things, to include but are not limited to the following. So it certainly doesn't have to be a limitation. I can think of others that we could add to this right now. One is what I would like to see a heck of a lot more of, sorry, which is the, cement, I don't know what you call it, but the cement, not median, but at the edge of the street, and then just have that be the separator. And that's a safety for pedestrians. In lieu of a sidewalk that's very expensive. It's not that hard to put in a little cement buffer.
Are you talking like a curb?
I guess those are curbs. I don't know. They're about this tall.
Yeah.
No, well, Jersey barrier is huge, but yeah, just
An
a,
extruded
just a curb.
Similar
Yeah.
to what we have on 182nd.
I would have to look up what's on 82nd, but I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah,
If
just
you
a
look at other
extruded curb,
cities, so yeah. And yeah, I think we don't want to lose sight of all of the options that are short of sidewalks. And there are many of them. So I'd like to keep that table.
Councilmember File.
Thank you for all your hard work on this. I appreciate the time it takes to update code. And why I do see the need to update the language as we come along, I also agree with Councilmember Shrevenick. It's nice to have and track our evolution really of traditional to modern, or what we are moving on to with our language and what we mean by it. As it brings community with us instead of leaving people behind. I see that we have, for example, street lighting crossed out in a couple places here, yet I don't actually see it come up elsewhere. And that's just in the table, but I don't see it come up elsewhere. I don't know where it has moved to or how it's being replaced. The other thing is, complete streets, these are our multimodal routes of transportation. The goal matches our accessibility for our community to be able to move throughout our community from one mode to the next. And that can take many different routes. So where is street lighting in this? And how is this matching up with our accessibility when we're removing or at least striking street lighting? What are you replacing that with?
So within this particular section 12.45, street lighting was identified as a traditional way to provide for a complete street. And I'm not necessarily deleting street lighting from the options from there. I was just more leaving it open-ended so that we could have other policies like our traffic calming policy, our road standards, other things like that that we can update to reflect current times, current things that are new and innovative, and not have to come back to the code and make revisions. I do like what Councilmember Shrevenick did say is, keep the table, but add some flexibility in there that we can add or delete things if we want to do that. I think it's a great idea. In regards to lighting in general, that is covered in the road standards. Everything that is required for lighting, for proper lighting levels for pedestrians, for vehicles, that's all addressed in the road standards. So if there's any question about what we do or how we do, that's where we go to give direction to the public and the developers and whatnot.
Okay, and then just one more question off of that. How do we evaluate the lighting of different street corridors for good night vision, for example?
So typically what you do is you do a lighting study and you hire somebody to go out there at night with light meters, and they identify the lumens that exist within that area. And if they don't fall within the requirements of our code, then that would allow us to either make a request to Puget Sound Energy to install lights if there's available poles out there. We can ask them to install another light to provide that additional illumination if we need to. But to clarify as well too, is we are not actively going out there and measuring every street, every corner to see whether or not there's a light issue. If somebody has a concern about lighting, they make the request through Puget Sound Energy, and Puget Sound Energy does all the legwork. And if they can add a light to a pole, then we've told them, go ahead and add it. If they can't do that, if they had to put in a separate pole, then we ask them to speak to us first, because that adds to our maintenance cost. Every time they add a pole like that, it's higher than just a single luminaire. So we do have a process in place for adding new lights within the city, but they're usually driven by our residents, because they're the ones that actually see it better than we do. Because for the most part, we don't work at night unless it's a Monday. So.
True, true. My thought here is that it appears we have a room for improvement around areas that are known bus stops for persons traveling by commuter bus. Also with school bus stops, whether it's early morning hours when it's dark or coming home in those darker hours, that these are areas of concern for our community members. And we have some areas now which are under construction where we have signs out, for example, where there are school bus stops. And it's just to identify where the bus stop is at with next to no lighting. I'm always going to be concerned for our community and thinking about our community first, as well as meeting our target zero goals. I do hope that we can work together with our partners and stakeholders on these issues and moving forward. So thank you.
Uh, 12.50 road standards. This section covers our road standards and how we develop within the right of way. What's changed here is I've clarified administrative changes within the current code. We say minor changes. And so I've changed that to de minimis changes, as that's a legally defined term. I've also added that we can make changes to comply with our code, state and federal law. I've added privately owned roads and city projects as required to follow the road standards. I've exempted city maintenance activities as approved by the city engineer. I have added the option to approve variances during construction. Currently, we only are able to approve them during the design process, and we find things come up during construction that may require some variances. So added that in there. I added fees within the road standards, and this is specifically for variances to the road standards. And then I also added a note that the road standards interpretations are final once made.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Little question. Your fourth bullet there, added private owned roads. So those are private roads. There's lots of them out there that don't meet our road standards. So is this newly constructed ones?
Correct.
Oh,
constructed.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the road standards only apply to newly constructed or activities that may make a change to those roads. Yeah, we're not actively going out there. This doesn't comply, change it. One thing I also wanted to bring up, I bring it up now just because it's something new we found out. The Washington Administrative Code, the Washington Model Traffic Ordinance, actually requires us to do a resolution if we are going to prohibit or limit parking on any streets. When we approved the road standards back in 2021, we did an ordinance, and speaking with our city attorney, she advised us to do a resolution to comply with the WAC. So within the road standards, we've got the following cross sections: 73rd, 61st, 80th, 84th, 170th, 192nd, and 203rd, where we show parking being removed. And you had the opportunity to look at those way back when, and I'm just bringing this up now for your information that I'm going to be coming to you with a resolution to officially accept the loss of parking on those streets. So.
Councilmember Baker.
Have we discussed those changes to 170th yet, or we're just going through general parking now?
So the changes to 170th will be next Monday.
Fine.
And the resolution that I'm mentioning will be after that.
Fine.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
So are you saying that every time we remove parking, we're gonna, oh geez, okay.
I'm waiting for a clarification from our city attorney on the actual language. It looks like we have some authority if it's less than 100 feet.
Okay.
I think it's not clear to me. It's code language, so.
Councilmember File.
So let me get this right. On some of our downtown main arterials where we have denser housing, for example, we're going to be removing more parking. Where do you expect those cars that are there now in these communities to park?
So the expectation is that they provide parking on their respective lots. There are requirements within the code that indicate how much parking they have to provide, and that's where the requirement stands. One of the main reasons for removing the parking is to make room for bike lanes. Right now, most of our infrastructure is currently built, and to provide parking and bike lanes would require us to take property and potentially houses, buildings, which is not something that we really want to do if we can avoid it. Property acquisition is it's not fun. And so we try to avoid as much as possible. So this was, the removing of the parking was a compromise to provide our multimodal streets. Without removing the parking, we can't have bike lanes.
That sounds very convenient, right? Your statement sounds very convenient, but we had conversations not that long ago, discussions as a council on our TOD, for example, on the possibility of creating denser housing that could eventually be in these areas. And under those recommendations were less parking available. But here today, you're saying make that parking available. So which is it? Are we asking builders to build in the parking or not? Are we exempting the parking and saying, oh, that's okay now, but we're going to take that away? So which is it? I want us to be consistent when we're having these conversations and thinking about our growth and what we're putting out to our community, because this does cause confusion.
And we are being consistent with the road standards. Right now, our TOD is adjacent to 522, and we're maintaining the parking along 181st from 73rd to 61st. We're also maintaining the parking where we were able to on 73rd from 181st to 185th. We also maintain the parking on 68th through the downtown up to 185th. And then we also have parking on the side streets going along 181st. Other areas, for example, like Simon's, the parking has already been removed. On 80th, we do have some parking, but it's not TOD or high density, it's residential, and they have parking on their side streets or within their own private properties. 61st, council made a decision to, back in, I want to say 2021, to remove a lot of the parking to get the grant to replace the sidewalks. Actually, we specifically went to council for that approval, so that was addressed there. 192nd, there is some parking on the street in that location, but since council has decided that they did not want to take the Tolt River Trail through this Swamp Creek, 192nd is the only other logical place to put a bike facility, and so that's why parking has to go away on 192nd. And 203rd, it's residential housing along there as well too, and there's parking within the homes of that location. So that's, I believe that we have been addressing the issues of high density housing and maintaining the parking in the areas where we can maintain it.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yep, and I'm looking forward to discussing it, more thoroughly next week for sure. But the 61st, so then would this proposal be removing all parking on 61st? So that's removing more parking than we approved with the tree plan?
So with the proposal that we brought to council to get the grant money was to remove the parking on 61st to make room for the bike lane. So there would be no parking from along that corridor north of 181st.
Not all of it, but 181st North then.
181st, well, there's really no parking between 522 and
Yeah, for
175th.
ways.
But definitely not down by Arrowhead. That's not that 61st. It's just north of 522.
Councilmember Kugler.
The resolution that is referred to in this slide, do you know when that was passed?
So the ordinance that was passed in November of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, and that ordinance covered all but the 170th? Is that right?
Actually, no, it did cover 170th. Within
Oh,
the
okay.
cross-section 170th, we show a right turn lane with a shared bike lane. So the way it is today matches our cross-section. And then next Monday, we'll be talking about changes to that.
Okay. Yeah, so, but the upshot is we've already made decisions about these cross sections that you're
Correct.
talking about. So we
Yes.
don't need to revisit whether we should do it. Okay, thanks.
So 1255 utilities on city right of way. This is probably one of our biggest changes to the road standards. This covers how utilities permit within the right of way. Most of the chapter, most of the information that we've been using as a guideline for how we use permits in the right or utilities in the right of way was based off of the King County Accommodation Utilities. And the last time that was updated was 1997. So we've been using that standard since we incorporated. So I've unfortunately had to pretty much rewrite 1255 completely as it just, there's nothing really to go off of. And so 1255 in a grand sense is a brand new title with all new language. I'll go through it as quickly as I can. 55005 are general provisions. This, of course, establishes the chapter. It provides general conditions for the sections, and it also adds requirements to follow the municipal code, state and federal codes, industrial codes, and other codes as they apply. There's the purpose that just clarifies that this chapter regulates utility facilities within the right-of-way. It previously just said franchise utilities, and so I've made it all utilities. Again, the utility permit is required. I broadened the requirement to all utility owners. Again, it just said franchise. So I'm making this as a requirement for anybody who owns a utility. I've exempted certain utility work done as part of city projects. So again, as I mentioned earlier, if they're doing a work as part of our project, then they can get an exemption from the right-of-way permit as long as they have a contract agreement with the city and interlocal. I also removed the requirement for city projects to install conduit for future city utilities. So according to the code, we're supposed to be adding lots of conduit for the city's utility infrastructure, which we don't have city utilities to add to those infrastructure. So I took out that requirement. It also establishes that the utility's responsibility for the permitted work, saying that you're responsible for the work that you're actually doing. And it also establishes an option for an annual maintenance permit. One of the reasons we throw this in there is that the utilities are required to get a permit for every activity they do in the right-of-way. And their maintenance activities could result in tons and tons of permits, and some utilities won't get the annual maintenance permit, and it's creates a lot of workload for us. And so we're making it a requirement that they actually have to get one. Or I'm sorry, we're making the requirement that they should get one, but if they don't, then they're gonna have to get a permit for every single little activity. 55030, utility permit application. We established an expiration to match the other permits within the city. We also established that if a permit's inactive, that we can terminate it. And that is consistent with how we do our permits and development services for private development. It also establishes an application extension exemption. So there are certain things that we say that if you want a permit extension, you have to fit one of these little categories. And it's usually something that's out of their control. 125540 utility permit fees. We established a billing procedure, which is an administrative procedure that we've created internally. Also added the following fees to the fee section. And we also added minimum charges for after hours work. We have some utilities that want to work nights or weekends. And given that we are limited staff, we require a 4-hour minimum so that my inspector can get out there and get some work done and do other things as well too, versus coming out for 30 minutes and then going home. Utilities are, 5560 utility permit application review form. We added the road standards and code compliance that wasn't included in there. We removed the requirement to review compliance with North Shore Utility District's comprehensive plan. That was a code requirement that we had to review those with every permit. We added a requirement that they need to provide traffic control plans. That's not in there. It's not required that they do that. And it also establishes that they have to use our forms. And then 5565, we establish permit expirations and extensions for those. A fee for that. We set penalties for work that's not completed within a time period. So if a contractor has not done restoration and it lingers and we consider it an issue, we can either fine them or we can do it ourselves and bill them for the activity. 5570 emergencies. This actually allows the utilities to actually do work for emergencies. Previously, it just said that they can only do emergency work if it was a public health issue. So I just made it carte blanche emergencies, but I also added in language that specifies what emergency is, and it has to be agreed upon by the city and the utility. And then, of course, I revised this to include all utilities. It was previously just franchise utilities. 55130, within enforcement, we set fines for non-compliance with this chapter. So if they do work without a permit, or if they don't provide traffic control plans and they take lanes when they're not supposed to, any kind of violation, that we're allowed to fine them. 55115, we added insurance indemnification there. So I'm sorry. These are all new sections that we had to add that were not included in the original, the current code. One is insurance indemnification. So we had to add in that the utilities have to provide insurance indemnification if they don't have a franchise agreement. We established working hours and allowable work closures, road closures, and it's in compliance with 8.05 of our KMC. Also added a section about utility locates. This, believe it or not, we do get some pushback on utilities about actually locating their utilities. And we've had some difficulties in getting them to actually tell us where the utilities are. And so I've added some provisions in there saying that you have to do it. And then 55155, I added consideration for aesthetics and scenic areas. So if they want to put a utility in something that's a viewpoint, then they have to go through us and meet certain requirements. If they want to put a new pole, they may not be able to. They might have to do something underground or make something decorative. So we're wanting to make sure that they don't ruin our viewpoints. And not just viewpoints too. If we've got a nice park and they want to put some ugly thing in front of it, then we could say no. 55-160, adjustments and relocations. So this is requiring utilities to relocate, repair, and remove their facilities at their expense. Right now, I'm sure you're well aware, we have difficulty sometimes with the utilities actually relocating when we want to, poles that sit in the right of way for months and months and months because a secondary utility has not pulled off. Well, this now gives us the ability to order the utility that's not moved to get off the pole, or they will get fined. And then it also provides clarification on what we can and can't do with utilities for projects. It establishes a more, it clarifies rules for relocations, and if they're not done in a timely manner, what our options are for that. 55-165, add the provision that the utilities have to make sure that their facilities are safe and secure. They can't leave them as a public hazard. 55-170 talks about abandonment of the utilities. So for example, if a utility has a company has a utility underground and they want to leave that piping system underground, currently the way it's written is they can do that and we're responsible for it. And the way I've written this is that they can abandon it, but they're still responsible for it. So if it has to be relocated, they still have to relocate it. So I made a clarification that they still own that, regardless of whether or not they've got a utility flowing through it. And then 55-175, I added the provision for right-of-way vacations. It establishes awareness to the utility about their utilities in the right-of-way if it should go towards a vacation process. And you will be hearing more about right-of-way vacations on our one of our discussions as a section that I had to add. Last one. Any questions on that?
Wireless, they still have they still have the right of the option. If we don't answer them within a specific period of time, I think 2 weeks, they can go do what they want to do.
What do you? I'm not following.
Inciting.
All right. In what?
Wireless providers.
Wireless providers.
Inciting.
Yeah, that's a different section.
Okay, but
yeah. So I'll get to that.
That's fine.
I think next week or the next section. I think I'll show you here later when I get to it. Yeah, I haven't read that section recently, so hard to memorize the whole thing.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, on the fee section, I think it's 5540. I was a little confused. It references the most current fee schedule, but then it lists some additional fees, none of which are defined. So for example, accelerated job start fee, it just says there'll be an additional fee. It doesn't say what it is. So is there some other document that talks about what these fees are?
So 125540 defines the fees. For example, the accelerated job fee is at the request of the utility, a job start request with less than the required notice may be approved. If it's approved, then there's a fee for that. So it is defined in there.
Well, I mean, in dollars is what I'm saying.
Oh, in dollars. So
yeah. What is the fee?
So in the I can't recall exactly where it states it, but it says that the fee structure is established by resolution by city council. And remember,
so
every year,
that's the fee schedule.
That's the fee schedule that's
so
brought to
all
you.
of these are existing fees that are in the fee schedule.
I don't recall if all of them are. I believe some are there, but not all of them.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
so it either is there or it isn't. And the ones that are, we don't need to belabor the point. We just reference it. And if they're new, they need to be defined with dollars. So and that's why I was confused about this section, because it seems to be saying both things.
So the intent of this section is to establish the authority to do the fee. And then if there are any fees that have to be added, they'll be added with the next fee structure, the next fee schedule update in November.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So some of these may be new and we'll need to establish them.
Yes.
Okay. And then the last thing, maybe it was the same as Councilmember Baker was talking about. This 55, 155, the aesthetic and scenic considerations. So this does not include cell towers then? This is something else.
Yeah, this specific section does not reference cell towers.
Okay.
I believe I took that language. Now my brain's getting going here. I believe I took that language from the wireless cell tower and put it into the utility section because I felt that it was necessary to put that provision there as well.
The wireless is coming up in the next section.
Yes, yes.
I knew I read it somewhere.
And I knew it as well too. And it's like, oh, okay. Any other questions?
I don't see any further questions.
Okay, let me get to my last slide. So next steps on April 17th, I will be covering chapters 1258 to 1270, which is the wireless communication facilities, public-private utilities on real properties, snow emergency routes, and the planting, sidewalk planting strips and street tree provision that we have in there. So it's right-of-way maintenance. On May 1st, 1280 through 1295, the Integrated Transportation Program, 522 Access Management, TBD, and then the new chapter, Street Vacations, along with any final discussions that council may have. And then on May 22nd, I'm looking to adopt the ordinance for the Title 12 changes, and then the resolution I mentioned earlier about parking. So that is the end of my presentation. If there are any additional questions, final thoughts.
I have one final thought. I don't see any other questions or final thoughts. Thank you for putting this together in such a digestible manner that we were able to get through this big chunk of work in an hour or slightly under. So thank you. Very well organized. Outstanding, honestly. Thank you. Next, we have staff reports.
Now I know what you're doing when you're hiding from me.
Assistant City Manager Lou Cash.
Don't have anything for tonight. Thanks.
Council member reports and comments. Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I was at National League of Cities last week, and I had the pleasure of talking with our delegation. In particular, I spoke with Senator Murray's staff about the culvert on 192 and the fish blockage, and asking for that project to be funded at 1.3 to 2 million. And mentioned that the permitting was slowing it down to a 2025 timeframe. I also talked about the Lindenmeyer property, 1.5 acres, turning it back to its wild state. That property is part of Muck Creek. And we're asking for $650,000 with a start date of summer of 2024. We also talked about ADA ramps and $3 million, the fact that we applied for them last year and we didn't get them. Also talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and the climate pollution grant. And that allows for planning for non-competitive consulting with Delbenny's staff, and we're going to use Delbenny's staff for that. I also talked with Murray and her staff and Cantwell staff and Delbenny's staff about Kenmore Air. A number of years ago, I fought that battle with Secret Service to allow them to land at the north end of the lake during presidential visits. And they have since chucked all that out and want to start again. And so I reminded the staffs how we fought that battle and to see if we could talk some semblance of reasonableness with the Secret Service, which is an impossible task. They're not very reasonable when it comes to presidential security. So we'll see. It's something that I'm going to keep on them about and see what we can do. because evidently they have discovered how much money we have out here to donate to political campaigns. So they love to come out, although it's not clear whether the president himself is going to be out here in the next 2 years. So we can keep our fingers crossed because it affects Kenmore Air to the tune of well over $70,000 each day. And forget the inconvenience to people in trying to get to cancer appointments and other doctor's appointments and connecting flights for business. And there is no warning on this. They just get a call and say, the customers just get a call and say, hey, your flight's been canceled. And we never know until the last minute because they keep the president's schedule secret. So anyway, we're working on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Baker. Councilmember Marshall.
Nothing to report, thanks.
Councilmember Kugler.
I just have one topic that I wanted to ask and see if there is support for, and that is, I'm not sure if you all saw the letter from Dr. Jensen over at University of Washington Bothell, who had previously come to talk to the council about trying to revive local kokanee in Lake Washington. And he asked for our support in installing some remote site incubators, which I think he'll be able to talk to staff and hopefully move forward with. But the other request was for a letter of support for kokanee restoration on behalf of the city. So I'm wondering if there is a majority of council who would be in support of us drafting a letter on behalf of City of Kenmore in support of their work. Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Looks like we have the majority. Thank you. Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, I was also, there were, I think, 4 of us at National League of Cities, and it was a great meeting. And I kind of focused on learning about funding opportunities that relate to our environmental sustainability and climate goals. So have a lot of notes about that and a lot of notes about how other municipalities are using their ARPA dollars in those ways as well, and others. That is pretty interesting. And went to the EPA and several other agency office hours to get even more information directly from the agencies providing the funds. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Shrevenick. Councilmember File.
Thank you. I'm going to try to keep it short because I don't have all of my voice back yet. Also attended National League of Cities convention, and that was a really successful trip. Of course, it's such a large conference that for those that did attend on our council, we barely saw each other because we're split off in different directions to be able to reach the needs of our community and bring that back home. So I attended the human development updates for the boards, as well as some diversity and equity updates to bring back. I found help and support for our city and applying to the very complicated grants that usually take ample staff time to put together or are under applied to because smaller cities like ours don't have the staff to be able to apply to. And so I found that staff support through the National League of Cities, and I've connected our city staff and executive staff too, and they have already responded and are happy to help us through that process and carry our package and bundle it with others to be delivered. And that's in infrastructure, environment, and health and well-being. So that includes housing, of course. We did meet with our federal delegation with our deputy mayor. And that was very excellent experience. On the Senate side, the federal Senate side, there's support for protecting our federal airspace here in Kenmore. It's a harder process on the congressional side. I think that conversation is supportive, yet it's a little bit difficult. I understand the Congress is a little bit of a standstill on that. So that's where we are at present. I look forward to giving other updates at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember File. Mayor Herbig.
Nothing to add, except thank you very much for running tonight's meeting while I recover from my cold, Deputy Mayor. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm glad I could step in for you, Mayor Herbig. I just have a brief comment. I too was at National League of Cities. Most of my comments were already covered. I guess that's one benefit of going towards the end. One takeaway though that I had was, as the cities, at National League of Cities, one of the things that shined is how much we have in common with each other, regardless of where we're from, the needs that we have to serve our community. And there was a lot of discussion about ARPA funds, how we're using them. And one of the things that came through was when cities get the funding they need to do things, we get things done for our communities. And I thought that was absolutely incredible. So when we think about the world that we live in today and our tax structure, one of the things that really crossed my mind is how we get funds to our cities. And it was just an interesting thing. The direct funds that the cities around our nation have gotten have infused communities, supported them, and made a huge difference. So a lot of gratitude to the funds that we got for ARPA, and just wanted to call attention to that. And we as people in our community and our world need to be looking at what we have in common and the needs that we have together. We have so much more that unites us than divides us. So we need to keep the eye on the prize of the things that we want in this world. And I was very thankful to have the experience to see that working with people across our nation in our nation's capital, the foundation of our democracy and what brings us here. On that note, I want to thank you all for going through this robust agenda today with nothing more to come before us. The Kenmore City Council is now adjourned.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.